Before the world had form, before stars pierced the black ocean of the sky, there was only chaos, a vast, shifting void, neither dark nor light, neither living nor dead. Out of that formless emptiness came the first whispers of being. Gaia, the earth, broad-breasted and eternal. Tartarus, the abyss beneath all things. And Eros, the sudden spark of creation that stirs all matter to move, to seek, to live. From Gaia's fertile body sprang the sky. Uranus, her consort and mirror, whose gleaming dome covered her green and rising hills. Together they birthed a lineage of powers older than time, the Titans, who would rule before the gods. Among them was Cronus, youngest and most cunning, his eyes sharp as the blade he carried. Uranus feared his children, for their strength might overthrow him, so he cast them into the hidden womb of earth. In agony, Gaia plotted revenge, and Cronus became her instrument. With a jagged sickle forged of flint, he ambushed his father beneath the cover of night and brought down the first blood of the cosmos. The sky groaned. Stars fell like sparks from a wounded fire. From that wound, the sea foamed, and from that foam one day would rise Aphrodite. Cronus, now lord of the Titans, claimed the heavens and the earth as his domain. Yet the shadow of prophecy fell over him like a cold mist. It was said that one day his own child would rise to overthrow him, just as he had overthrown his father. Terrified, Cronus devised a dreadful cure for fate. Each time his wife, Rhea, bore a child, he swallowed it whole. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, each vanished into his cavernous belly, imprisoned in darkness, their cries muffled by divine flesh. Rhea's heart broke with every loss, her mother's instinct crushed beneath the rule of fear. But when she carried her sixth child, a new light flickered in her resolve. One storm-torn night, she fled to the island of Crete, guided by Gaia's whisper and the faint gleam of moonlight on the Aegean. There, in a secret cave on Mount Dicte, she gave birth to Zeus, the child of prophecy, small, trembling, yet already marked by the scent of thunder. His first cry echoed through the cavern, a sound that made the cave walls tremble with a pulse older than the wind. Rhea, desperate to protect him, wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and presented it to Cronus. Blinded by arrogance and fear, the Titan devoured it without question. The world sighed, the seed of rebellion was safe. In the cave, the nymphs Adrastea and Ida took the infant into their arms. Around them danced the Curetes, armored warriors who clashed their spears against their shields to drown out his cries. The air smelled of damp moss and goat's milk. The cave flickered with torchlight and shadow. Above them, the rain whispered against the stone, as though the heavens themselves were holding their breath. Zeus grew not as a human child does, but with the pace of the divine, each moon rising brought new strength. He drank the milk of Amalthea, the sacred goat whose horns would one day overflow with abundance. The cornucopia. He played among the mountain mists, chasing eagles, learning the rhythms of thunder before he could speak its name. There, in the solitude of that hidden world, the boy who would be king listened to the heartbeat of nature. He felt the pulse of rivers, the breath of storms, the silent dignity of stone. When he gazed into the distance, he could sense the trembling fear that hung over heaven and earth. Cronus's tyranny, the unnatural stillness of a world devoured by fear. At night, the stars wheeled above him, like the sparks of an unseen forge. Zeus would lie awake on the cave floor, tracing the constellations with his small finger, hearing faint voices in the wind, the voices of his imprisoned siblings calling from within the Titan's gut, their existence smothered but not extinguished. It was then that he first understood destiny not as a gift, but as a burden to be borne. As he grew older, the nymphs told him stories of his mother's courage, of the cruel Titan who swallowed his own blood. They taught him to listen to the murmur of the world, to call forth clouds with his breath and scatter them with a glance. They did not yet call him God, only child of the storm. Before the world had form, before stars pierced the black ocean of the sky, there was only chaos, a vast, shifting void, neither dark nor light, neither living nor dead. Out of that formless emptiness came the first whispers of being. Gaia, the earth, broad-breasted and eternal. Tartarus, the abyss beneath all things. And Eros, the sudden spark of creation that stirs all matter to move, to seek, to live. Years turned, seasons folded over one another like veils. Zeus became tall and bright-eyed, his voice steady as the sea wind. The eagles no longer fled his presence, but followed him, their wings slicing the air in reverent arcs. Amalthea aged and died, and from her hide Zeus fashioned his first armor, not of gold or iron, but of divine resilience. Rhea returned in secret, her hair silvered by sorrow, and told him of his brothers and sisters, swallowed by their father's dread. She spoke not as a queen but as a mother who had lost almost everything. "You are the youngest," she said softly, "but you must be the strongest. The world waits for you." Zeus listened, his face lit by the flicker of the cave's fire. Beyond its mouth, the night stretched vast and silent. He knew, then, that childhood had ended. To remain hidden was to let the world rot in the belly of fear. So, one morning heavy with mist, he set out down the mountain paths. The air was thick with the scent of pine and sea. The nymphs watched in silence, knowing they would never see him as a child again. At the base of Mount Dicte, Zeus paused and looked up the peaks above him, swallowed in cloud, the heavens echoing faintly with distant thunder. He raised his hand toward the sky and whispered, "I am coming." And somewhere far away, in his marble hall, Cronus stirred uneasily. He dreamed of a storm gathering beyond the horizon, of footsteps echoing toward his throne, the first tremor of the rebellion that would one day unseat the Titans. The wind carried the faint rumble of thunder across the sea, though no storm yet showed itself. It was the heartbeat of the future, the rhythm of fate awakening. In that moment, the cosmos shifted. The age of Titans was already trembling before the birth of the King of Gods, the child of prophecy. The winds over Crete carried the smell of rain and wild thyme as the young god wandered further from the cave that had sheltered his infancy. Each step he took was a note in a symphony of awakening. The world had begun to sense him. The pulse of his divinity thrummed through the veins of the island like the first tremor before a storm. Zeus, child of prophecy, born of rebellion and despair, now walked upon the living skin of the earth, with the silent promise of destiny upon his shoulders. The nymphs had called him by many names: Bright One, Hidden Thunder, the Unbroken Flame. Yet even they did not know how vast his path would become. For beneath the serenity of his youthful face slept a force as ancient as the first flash of lightning that split the heavens from the earth. At dawn, Zeus often climbed the ridges of Mount Ida, standing barefoot on cold stone as the wind combed through his golden hair. From that height he could see the sea silver and infinite, rolling softly beneath the sun. Sometimes he thought he could hear its song, a low whisper that seemed to say, "All things move toward their fate." He lived among the nymphs and the Curetes, learning from them the arts of survival and the wisdom of balance. Adrastea taught him patience, how the river carves its path not by force but by persistence. Ida taught him courage to face the tempest rather than flee it. The Curetes taught him the dance of battle, the rhythm of shield and spear, the heartbeat of war. But it was Amalthea, the sacred goat whose milk had sustained him, who first revealed to him the truth of sacrifice. When she grew old and frail, the day came when she lay down upon the grass and did not rise again. Zeus knelt beside her, the air trembling with grief. As the sun descended, he whispered his thanks, and from her horn, now empty, he promised abundance for the world, that no hunger would exist without the hope of fulfillment. From that vow came the cornucopia, the horn of plenty, the first gift of Zeus to creation. Each moment of his secret youth was a lesson, each breath a rehearsal for the storm that destiny prepared. One day, while wandering near the forested slopes, Zeus came upon an old figure cloaked in mist, a stranger whose eyes gleamed like molten amber. It was Metis, one of the Oceanids, goddess of wisdom and cunning thought. She had known Gaia and the Titans. She had seen empires rise and fall long before his birth. "Child of Rhea," she said, her voice calm as flowing water. "The world above trembles beneath Cronus's fear. He devours his children and calls it safety. But his belly groans with prophecy, and soon he will choke upon it." Zeus bowed his head respectfully. "Then what am I to do, Mother of Counsel?" Metis smiled faintly, a curve like moonlight across still water. "You must do what your father could not face fear, not flee from it. There will come a time when you will confront him, but not with strength alone. Cunning will free your kin. Wisdom will win the sky. Is Waitanize." She reached out and touched his brow, and at once a current of knowledge surged through him, the comprehension of storms, the law of cause and consequence, the deep truth that even gods must earn their thrones. "Remember this," she said, "the sky is not ruled by might alone, but by balance. Keep measure in your hand, or the thunder will consume even you." And with that, she vanished into the mist, leaving behind the faint scent of salt and rain. Zeus descended from the mountain with her words burning in his heart. He had never seen his father, yet he could feel his shadow upon every gust of wind. Cronus's reign smothered the heavens, his silence devouring the music of the cosmos. Life still existed, trees grew, rivers flowed, but all of it seemed muffled, restrained, like a song sung beneath heavy chains. At night, Zeus dreamt of his siblings trapped in darkness, Hestia's quiet endurance, Demeter's mournful patience, Hera's fury, Poseidon's defiance, Hades's despair. They called to him not in words but in pulses of feeling, waves of sorrow that beat against his mind. He would wake with clenched fists, the echo of their pain still throbbing in his chest. He began to prepare. From the volcanic stones of Crete, he forged his first weapon, a jagged blade crackling faintly with electricity. The nymphs watched him in awe, for though no thunderbolt yet existed, lightning obeyed his will. He practiced not merely to kill, but to understand. He could call a storm to heel with a whisper, calm the ocean with a breath. The island itself seemed to rise to meet his purpose. Eagles circled above him, sensing their future lord. The ground quivered when he walked. The trees bent subtly toward him, and when he stood still, the air hummed, as though waiting for command. The gods of the old order, the Titan brothers and sisters of Cronus, were not blind to this new pulse in the world. Oceanus, the gentle river god, felt the tremor in his endless waters. "A wind is changing," he murmured to his wife Tethys. "Something young and bright grows in secret." But far above, in the marble halls of Mount Othrys, Cronus sat uneasy on his throne of stone and shadow. His dreams were filled with omens, a baby's cry that split the heavens, a storm rising from the sea. He would wake and clutch his sickle, listening for footsteps in the dark, for he knew the cycle he had begun would one day return to him. Meanwhile, Zeus sought allies. Metis appeared again to him by moonlight, her eyes reflecting the tides of the future. Together, they plotted the great deception that would free his kin and unmake the tyranny of the Titans. She prepared a potion brewed from honey, mountain herbs, and the will of the earth itself. "When the time comes," she whispered, "you will offer this to your father as a gesture of loyalty. He will drink, and the past will rise again from his belly." Zeus nodded. The plan was perilous, but destiny was no longer a distant horizon. It had drawn close enough to taste like iron in his mouth. He waited until the sky ripened into autumn's gold, when the harvests of men flourished under the dim light of the Titan's rule. Then he crossed the Aegean, hidden by cloud and mist, his presence cloaked by the old magic of Metis. When he reached Mount Othrys, He stood before Cronus's throne, a massive figure draped in iron-grey robes, eyes as hard as obsidian. The air around him stank of power grown stale. "Who are you, stranger?" Cronus asked, his voice deep as earthquakes. "A servant of the old gods," Zeus replied, bowing low. "I bring you a draft in honor of your eternal reign." User 18-9. Cronus's suspicion flickered, but arrogance dulled it. "Then pour, and may the heavens tremble at my name." Zeus offered the cup. The Titan drank, the potion sliding down his throat like fire. For a heartbeat, silence. Then Cronus convulsed. A roar tore from him that shook the pillars of his hall. From his mouth poured a blinding flood of light. And within that light came figures. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, gasping, free, reborn into the world. His first cry echoed through the cavern, a sound that made the cave walls tremble with a pulse older than the wind. Rhea, desperate to protect him, wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and presented it to Cronus. Blinded by arrogance and fear, the Titan devoured it without question. The world sighed. The seed of rebellion was safe. In the cave, the nymphs Adrastea and Ida took the infant into their arms. It split the air with a sound that tore the clouds apart. "Your time is over," he said. "The age of Titans ends tonight." And so began the first thunderstorm of history. The sky churned with fury. The mountains themselves seemed to awaken. The battle did not begin that night, but its promise had been sealed. The rebellion was born, not yet fought, but inevitable as dawn. Zeus led his siblings away from Othrys, back to the hidden sanctuary of Crete. There, beneath the eyes of Gaia, they swore an oath to free the cosmos from tyranny and bring balance once more to heaven and earth. "Each of you holds a part of the storm," Zeus told them. "Together we will tear down the darkness our father built." Poseidon clenched his trident-shaped staff, its tips glimmering with sea foam. Hades's eyes gleamed with the depth of shadow. Hera's fury burned as bright as Zeus's lightning, and Demeter's sorrow hardened into resolve. Hestia, calm and silent, tended the fire that would keep their unity alive. That night, lightning danced above Mount Ida for hours, unseen by mortal eyes but witnessed by the eternal. In that light, the world changed course, the future reshaped by the will of one child born in secret, raised among nymphs, taught by wisdom, and armed by prophecy. The age of Titans still held the throne, but now it trembled. The heavens had a new heartbeat, the rhythm of thunder yet to come. The storm had found its name. Zeus, child of prophecy, heir to sky and storm. The bright rebellion against darkness had awakened. The Titan's shadow. The wind over the Aegean carried a new sound, now low, trembling, filled with a tension that even the waves seemed to feel. The world stood on the edge of a vast reckoning. The Titans ruled still, but their dominion quaked beneath them. Deep in the caverns of Mount Othrys, Cronus, the devourer of his children, could no longer rest. The prophecy he had spent an age trying to devour was alive again and growing stronger. Zeus had vanished from the halls of the Titans, his siblings beside him, like a lightning bolt striking and then fading into cloud. But the echo of that strike lingered, vibrating through heaven and earth. Cronus felt it in the marrow of creation itself. He knew that somewhere, the sun he had once swallowed and spat out now gathered power against him. Still, he would not yield. For Cronus was not merely a tyrant, he was time incarnate, patient, relentless, consuming all things. His rule had lasted an eternity, and he would not surrender it without a war that would burn the world to ash. Meanwhile, far across the seas, hidden again among the slopes of Mount Ida, Zeus and his freed siblings prepared for what was coming. The cave that had once sheltered his infancy now became the cradle of rebellion. Within its ancient stone walls, a council of gods was born. Hades spoke first. his voice deep and steady as the chasm of the underworld he would one day command. We cannot face him alone. His strength is the weight of the ages. He has armies of titans, each one older and more terrible than any mountain. Poseidon leaned forward, the light of sea fire flickering in his eyes. Then we need allies of our own forces older than him. The earth still remembers Uranus's agony. Gaia will not stand idle while her sons devour one another. It's due with Gressel. Zeus listened, the storm flickering faintly at his fingertips. His gaze was calm, though his heart beat like thunder behind it. Yes, he said softly. The mother of all will decide how this war begins. They descended into the caverns beneath Crete, where roots of the world intertwined and the air pulsed with an ancient life. There, in a vast, breathing darkness, they found Gaia herself, a mountain-shaped form, her skin the soil, her breath the wind. Her eyes were deep caverns glowing faintly with green fire. "You have come, my grandson," she said, her voice echoing like a distant avalanche. "The cycle returns, as it must. The father devoured the son. The son will overthrow the father. But remember this, power is not justice. If you take the throne, you must hold it with wisdom, or you will fall as he did." Zeus bowed his head. "Then guide me, great mother. Show us the path. Thens will die us." Gaia's enormous hand brushed the cave floor, and from the earth itself rose three figures massive, bound in chains of stone and shadow. Their eyes gleamed red with fury. Their breath scorched the air. "The Cyclopes," Gaia said. "Your father cast them into Tartarus for fear of their fire. Free them, and they will forge for you the weapons of the gods." The Cyclopes roared, their voices shaking the mountain. They were the smiths of the cosmos, one-eyed and eternal, born from the bones of creation. Zeus approached them without fear. With a flash of lightning, he shattered their chains, and the prison crumbled like old sand. "Remember this day," he said, "not as the day you were freed, but as the day the storm began." The eldest Cyclops bowed, his single eye burning like a forge. "Then let us make the tools of your destiny, if you are with conversations." For 9 days and 9 nights, the mountain shook with the pounding of hammers. Fire blazed in caverns unseen by mortal eyes. The Cyclopes forged weapons for each of the divine siblings: Poseidon's trident, which could split the sea; Hades' helm of darkness, which could turn the wearer invisible; and for Zeus himself, the thunderbolt, pure, radiant power distilled from the heart of the storm. When the 10th dawn broke, Zeus stood upon the summit, holding the newborn thunderbolt aloft. The sky above him answered in kind. Clouds gathered, silver and violent, swirling in a dance of awe. The first flash of lightning, not born from nature but from will, streaked across the heavens. The earth trembled. The age of the Titans had just been given its end, but Cronus, too, was gathering his armies. From the black depths of Tartarus, he called forth his brothers and sisters: Hyperion the Fire Lord, Iapetus the Warlord, Coeus the Seer, Creus of the Southern Winds, and Oceanus, who alone refused the call, for he valued the balance of creation more than conquest. Cronus's consort, Rhea, watched in silence, her heart torn. She had birthed both the tyrant and the storm that would destroy him. Cronus raised his sickle high before his gathered host. "They would unmake what I have built," he thundered, his voice rolling like the grind of stone. "They would throw the cosmos into chaos. My children, born of rebellion, would drown the world in fire. Shall we yield to them?" The Titans roared in answer. The mountains shook, the seas rose, the very sky seemed to bend under the weight of impending war. Back upon Olympus, which was not yet the shining seat of gods, but a lonely mountain crowned with mist, Zeus assembled his siblings. "The time has come," he said quietly, though the air around him crackled with restrained fury. "We will not fight for vengeance. We fight for the freedom of the world, for every life devoured by fear." Demeter stepped forward, her green eyes steady. "Then, Let this war end the long winter. Hera's voice was cold but resolute. Our father taught us cruelty. Let us teach the world justice. Hades said nothing. He merely drew his helm over his brow, and his form melted into shadow. Poseidon slammed his trident into the rock, and water burst forth, spiraling into the sky. And so began the Titanomachy, the war of gods and titans. The first battle erupted in the plains of Thessaly, where heaven met earth in a storm of fury. The Titans came from the west, vast as mountains, their skin shimmering with the light of the ancient stars. The Olympians met them in the east, their bodies glowing like molten dawn. When they clashed, the sound was not like thunder, it was thunder. Zeus hurled his first bolt. It struck Hyperion, the Fire Lord, and split the horizon with blinding light. Poseidon shattered mountains with his trident, sending torrents of sea crashing inland. Hades, unseen, crept behind the enemy lines, striking fear into their minds. The world became an anvil upon which divinity itself was hammered. For 10 years, the war raged. Mountains crumbled, oceans boiled, stars fell from the heavens. Mortals had not yet been born to see it, but the echoes of that battle would remain forever in the soul of the earth, in every storm, every quake, every clash of thunder and fire. At times, it seemed neither side could win. Cronus wielded his sickle with terrible precision, severing bolts of lightning from the sky. The Titans towered over the battlefield, their roars shaking the firmament. Yet the Olympians grew stronger with every clash, their unity a weapon more potent than any blade. In the 10th year, the war reached its breaking point. The Titans rallied on Mount Othrys for one final stand. The sky itself darkened, the sun hidden behind endless storm clouds. Lightning flashed, illuminating the faces of gods and monsters alike. Zeus stood at the forefront, his armor glimmering like a second sun. He raised his hand, and the thunderbolt leapt from his palm, a strike so pure it burned through Cronus's sickle, shattered it into 1,000 shards, and pierced the heart of the old world. Cronus fell to his knees, the sky bleeding light. His children surrounded him, not in triumph, but in sorrow. For the fall of a father, even a cruel one, still wounds the heart. Zeus looked down at the fallen Titan, his voice quiet yet final. Your time has ended. Rest beneath the world you sought to own. About Werg, with a gesture, he opened a chasm in the earth, vast and unending. The Titans were cast into Tartarus, bound in chains forged by the Cyclopes, guarded by monstrous beings called the Hecatoncheires, giants, with 100 arms and 50 heads, the keepers of divine wrath. As the pit closed, the first dawn of the new age broke across the world. The light was softer now, golden and clean. The war was over. The age of the Olympians had begun. The gods stood in silence, gazing across the smoking horizon. They had won, but victory came with a price. The scars of their battle would never heal completely. The earth still bore the blackened bones of mountains broken by divine hands. The air still trembled with echoes of ancient thunder. Zeus lowered his hand, the lightning dimming around him. He knew what must come next. A new order, a world of balance, not tyranny. And from the ashes of the old, Olympus would rise, the war of the gods. When the thunder ceased and the smoke of the last battle faded, the world stood reborn, shaken, scarred, but alive. The sea had receded, the mountains had stilled, and the wind, though weary, hummed again with the voice of renewal. The Titans had been cast into Tartarus, chained in darkness deeper than memory, and the heavens themselves seemed to tremble at the quiet that followed. But for Zeus and his siblings, the silence was not peace, it was aftermath. The earth still bled from the wounds of war, its valleys scorched, its rivers clogged with ash. From the western horizon to the edge of the rising sun, the air smelled of iron, lightning, and smoke. The war of gods had ended, but the task of building a world had only just begun. Zeus stood upon the peak of Mount Olympus, his hair stirred by the remnants of the storm. Around him gathered his brothers and sisters, each exhausted, each radiant with the strange glow of immortality. Their bodies bore no wounds, yet their eyes reflected what they had endured. 10 years of cosmic fury, of loss, of creation unmade and remade. For a long while, none spoke. The only sound was the faint crackle of lightning still lingering in Zeus's palm. At last, Poseidon broke the silence. "It is finished," he said, his voice like the surf of the sea, endless, rolling, weary. "No," Zeus replied softly. "It has only begun." Is one began? He turned his gaze downward, over the endless plains of Thessaly where their war had raged. In the distance, clouds still smouldered, red and gold like the dying embers of a forge. The Titans are gone, but the balance they broke must be restored. The world will not heal itself. Demeter stepped forward, her green eyes fierce and bright. "Then we must tend it," she said. "Let the earth breathe again. Let the soil remember how to grow." Any 18, and the seas must know their limits once more. Poseidon added, "The tides are wild. They follow no law." Hades stood apart from the rest, his cloak of shadow trailing like smoke. "And what of the dead?" he asked. "So many fell in this war, beasts, giants, even divine ones. They drift in the void without rest. Someone must guide them." Zeus turned to him, the light of dawn catching the silver threads of his armor. "Then that will be your dominion, brother. You shall rule the underworld not as punishment, but as keeper of balance. You will watch over the souls that pass beyond the veil." Hades inclined his head, wordless, accepting the burden. "To you, Poseidon," Zeus continued, "I grant the sea. Let it be your kingdom, vast and deep as your heart. Its tides will answer to your will." Poseidon smiled faintly, his trident gleaming. "Then let the oceans rise and fall in harmony, brother. I will keep them from swallowing the land again. Leasing docking, and I," said Zeus, "shall take the sky, the realm of wind and storm, of thunder and justice. It will be my duty to watch over both heaven and earth." Thus the world was divided, not by conquest, but by necessity. The three brothers, bound by blood and destiny, became the pillars of creation. Zeus of the heavens, Poseidon of the seas, and Hades of the dead. The sisters too took their sacred roles, Demeter to nourish the soil, Hera to guard the sanctity of family and law, Hestia to tend the sacred flame of home and hearth. The old chaos of the Titans gave way to a divine order. Olympus was born. Yet peace did not come easily. The echoes of war lingered in the bones of the gods. Every thunderclap, every whisper of wind seemed to carry the ghosts of the fallen Titans. At night, Zeus would look east, where the stars glittered coldly over the world they had remade, and think of Cronus. He did not hate his father, not anymore. Hate was a burden, and he had too much to carry already. But in his heart, he felt a warning. "I have overthrown my father. One day, perhaps, my own child will rise against me." The thought was a shadow that never left him. Meanwhile, in the depths of Tartarus, the Titans stirred. They could not die, but they could dream, and in their dreams, they plotted vengeance. Cronus sat in silence, staring at the endless black walls of his prison. Around him, Hyperion's flames flickered dimly, and Iapetus's voice murmured in the dark. "Time cannot be chained forever," Cronus whispered. "Even the mightiest sons will feel the weight of what they inherit." Lenar, above them, the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires guarded their prison with watchful eyes. But the hum of rebellion, faint and ancient, still pulsed through the depths. For now, however, Olympus thrived. Zeus shaped the mountains into halls of shimmering marble, crowned with cloud and gold. He placed thrones for his kin, each carved with symbols of their power. Hera's was crowned with peacock feathers, Poseidon's with shells and coral, Demeter's with sheaves of golden wheat. At the heart of it all, Zeus's own throne stood radiant, carved from the bones of lightning, its arms alive with crackling light. From this high seat, he watched the world take shape. The rivers found their courses again, the forests grew tall, and the air hummed with the music of rebirth. But the earth was still barren of thought and voice. It teemed with creatures born of chaos, yet none with the spark of reason. That gift, Zeus knew, would one day arrive and bring both wonder and trouble. He had little time to rest before another challenge arose. The earth began to quake once more, not with the fury of titans, but with something older still. From the chasms of the underworld emerged monstrous forms, offspring of Gaia herself, born of her grief for her imprisoned children. Giants with the strength of mountains, dragons coiling around the horizon, beasts whose roars split the sky. Gaia's voice rumbled from deep beneath the soil. You cast my sons into darkness. You have chained the blood of earth itself. You will answer for it, Zeus. And so the new gods faced another storm. This war was shorter than the Titanomachy, but no less terrible, the Gigantomachy, the battle of giants. The earth itself rose against heaven, and Olympus thundered with the clash of divine might. Zeus fought with a fury the world had never seen. His lightning rained upon the plains, striking giant after giant, burning their shadows into the rock. Poseidon called waves that swallowed armies whole. Athena, born later, from the mind of Zeus, would one day aid him in this struggle, her spear shining brighter than dawn. When the last giant fell, crushed beneath Mount Etna, the world shuddered and then fell still once more. From beneath that very mountain, fire would continue to roar through eternity, the trapped breath of those defeated monsters, forever imprisoned beneath the weight of their rebellion. At last, peace returned. True peace, the kind that hums in the heart after the storm has passed. The rivers ran clear, the stars returned to their proper places, and Olympus glowed once again like a beacon above the mortal world. Zeus stood at its summit, his thunderbolt glowing faintly in his hand. He felt the pulse of the world, its warmth, its order, its fragile beauty, and for the first time he allowed himself to rest. Yet even as he closed his eyes, he sensed that this peace, too, would not last forever. For the world he and his kin had made was too vast, too full of life and chance, to remain untested. And somewhere, far below, in the hidden heart of the earth, the voice of destiny whispered, still, soft, patient, eternal. The cycle never ends. Zeus, the thunderer, king of heaven, did not yet know how deeply those words would one day wound him, but for now the sky was his. The rise of Olympus. When the fires of the Gigantomachy dimmed and the last rumblings of battle faded beneath the mountains, a profound stillness fell over the world. The air itself seemed to exhale. The seas calmed, the trees lifted their crowns toward the sky, and the first soft light of peace, true peace, bathed the land. For the first time since creation's dawn, heaven and earth stood in balance. At the heart of this reborn world rose a mountain whose summit pierced the very clouds. Olympus, a place of radiance, mystery, and eternal dawn. It was not yet the realm of song and marble halls that poets would one day dream of, but a living, breathing mountain, its peaks wreathed in mist, its slopes shimmering with divine energy. It was there, above the realm of mortals and below the vault of the stars, that Zeus and his siblings built their throne. Zeus stood at its summit, his hair still streaked with the ash of war, the air around him shimmering faintly with thunderlight. His gaze stretched across the horizon from the silver line of the sea, where Poseidon ruled, to the shadowed valleys below, where Hades tended the dead. His brothers, his sisters, his children each had found their place in this new cosmos, and now it fell to him to shape the order that would endure. Zeus was not content merely to be a conqueror. He had seen what unchecked power did to those who held it. His father had ruled through fear, binding even his own kin in chains. Zeus vowed that the new age would not repeat that mistake. The order he built would be one of balance of law, of justice, of measured strength. So, upon the peak of Olympus, the gods gathered. The great council convened beneath the open sky, where the clouds themselves served as their canopy. Each god sat upon a seat of power, crafted from their own essence. Poseidon's throne of sea foam and coral, Hades' seat of obsidian, Hera's golden chair, engraved with peacocks and lilies, Demeter's woven with vines and wheat, and Hestia's simple stool beside the sacred flame, for she needed no grandeur to remind the others of her worth. When all had taken their places, Zeus rose. His voice was calm, deep, and steady, a voice that rolled across the heavens like distant thunder. "My brothers, my sisters," he began, "the war has ended, but creation is not yet whole. We have inherited a wounded world. The seas must be tamed, the skies kept in harmony, and the earth nourished. Each of you holds a part of this balance. Each must rule your realm, not for pride, but for purpose." He turned first to Poseidon. "Brother of the sea, your waves will cradle the continents. Guard them, but do not smother them. The sea gives life and takes it away. Let your hand be both firm and fair." Poseidon bowed, trident gleaming. "I will," he said, "and the tides will know my justice." Then to Hades. "Brother of shadow, yours is the kingdom unseen. You will keep the balance between life and death. Let no mortal linger beyond their time, and no soul wander unjudged." Hades' eyes, dark as the void, glimmered faintly. "I accept," he said quietly. "I will rule not as tyrant, but as keeper of peace. Deal of these Zeri Pos of theirs." To Hera, his queen and sister, Zeus spoke next. "You are the guardian of the sacred bond, the weaver of loyalty and union. The hearts of gods and mortals will look to you for constancy." Hera inclined her head, her crown glinting like morning light. "Then I will watch over their vows and punish those who break them." Demeter, calm and strong, received her place as the nourisher. "The green world will be yours to tend," Zeus said. "Let its harvests mirror your compassion." "There is a side Varges," Demeter smiled faintly. "Wherever seeds are sown, my blessing will follow." And at last, to Hestia, the quiet flame beside them, Zeus bowed. "Elder sister, firstborn and last freed, your fire will be the heart of all hearths, the warmth of every home. May your flame never fade." Hestia's soft gaze met his. "While gods and men share bread, I will remain," she said simply. Thus were the realms divided, and the laws of heaven written not in ink, but in the living breath of creation itself. Zeus then raised his hand, and the sky itself responded. Clouds parted, and light poured upon the mountain. "Let this be the seat of the gods," he proclaimed. "Here we shall dwell in peace. Here we will watch, guide, and preserve the balance of all things." At his word, Olympus transformed. The stones glowed gold beneath his feet. Rivers of silver water sprang from the peaks, running like veins of light through the mountain. Palaces of marble and crystal rose as if born from air, their columns spiraling toward the stars. The wind carried the scent of myrtle and honey, and music, soft, wordless, seemed to emanate from the clouds themselves. Each god shaped their own domain upon Olympus. Poseidon's halls were built of coral and pearl, their walls shimmering like sunlight beneath the waves. Hera's palace stood grand and austere, filled with birds of every color. Demeter's gardens bloomed with eternal spring, wheat fields that glowed gold even beneath the night sky. Hades' realm remained apart, deep and silent, far beneath the earth, but its gates opened not in sorrow, but in solemn duty. Zeus's own hall stood at the highest point, its ceiling open to the heavens, its pillars carved from white marble streaked with veins of gold. Eagles perched upon its ledges, guardians of the storm. From this place he would watch over gods and mortals alike. Peace, at last, seemed within reach. Yet the heart of Zeus was not easily stilled. He knew that power, once won, must be guarded not only against foes, but against the corruption of one's own will. So he bound himself to law, just as he bound the cosmos to order. Justice, he decreed, would stand above all, even the gods. To ensure this, he summoned Themis, the Titaness of divine order, whom he had freed from her bonds after the war. She became his counselor and consort in wisdom, seated beside him at the throne. From her were born the Horae, the hours, who kept the balance of time, and the Moirai, the fates, who spun, measured, and cut the threads of life. It was Thepis who first warned him, "Do not mistake dominion for peace. The world you build must breathe, not obey. If you close your hand too tightly, even thunder will escape it." Zeus listened, and though he did not always heed her words in later ages, they took root within him like seeds that would one day bloom. As the years unfolded, though, to gods, years meant little. The world began to flourish. The seas glittered, mountains grew lush, and rivers sang through new valleys. The creatures of earth multiplied, birds, beasts, and serpents, all following their own rhythms. The winds carried the scent of flowers across continents still young and untouched by mortal hand. And yet, amid all this beauty, the gods began to feel a strange emptiness. The world was full but silent. There were no voices to praise, to wonder, to love. There was life, but not meaning. One evening, as dusk turned the clouds to rose and gold, Prometheus, the Titan, who had not joined his kin in rebellion, approached Olympus. His figure was tall and graceful, his eyes bright with restless intelligence. He bowed before Zeus. "King of the sky," he said, "the world you have made is splendid, but it lacks something essential. The beasts graze, the rivers flow, the stars turn, but there is no one to marvel at them, no mind to ask why." Zeus regarded him silently. "And what do you propose, son of Iapetus?" Prometheus smiled faintly. "That we shape beings in our image, creatures who can reason, dream, and remember. They will tend the earth as we rule the heavens. They will give voice to the world's wonder," the council murmured. Some gods nodded, intrigued. Others frowned, wary. Hera's eyes narrowed. Mortals? Such creatures would be fragile, imperfect. Why burden ourselves with their folly? "Because," Prometheus replied, "imperfection is the root of growth. They will stumble, yes, but they will also strive, and in their striving they will mirror the gods." Zeus considered this, for though he was wary of chaos reborn, he saw wisdom in Prometheus's words. "So be it," he said at last. "Let the world bear new life, not beasts, but minds. Let them rise from clay and spirit." And thus the first humans were shaped. Prometheus molded them from the earth's soft soil, and Athena, with a gentle breath, gave them soul. They stood trembling at first, eyes wide with wonder at the sky, the sea, the wind, the very gods who watched them. Zeus gazed upon them and felt a flicker of pride, but also a whisper of unease. For in their eyes he saw something dangerous, curiosity, a spark that no divine order could ever fully control. He turned away and said softly to Themis, "May wisdom guide them, or ruin will find them first." Themis's reply was calm, unafraid. "Both are part of the same path. King of heaven, even gods must let their children fall, so that they may learn to rise." And so, upon Olympus, the gods watched. They saw the first fires lit, the first songs sung, the first loves born beneath the stars. The world pulsed with new energy, a symphony of life that rose like incense toward the heavens. For now, peace held. The skies were bright, the seas calm, the hearts of the gods full of quiet satisfaction. Olympus stood gleaming, radiant, eternal, a monument not just to victory, but to renewal. But in the distance, in the minds of mortals, in the restless thoughts of titans yet unbroken, the seeds of future storms began to stir. The reign of Zeus had begun, but no reign lasts without challenge, and no creation, however divine, escapes the touch of shadow. Let them rise from clay and spirit. And thus, the first humans were shaped. Prometheus molded them from the earth's soft soil, and Athena, with a gentle breath, gave them soul. They stood trembling at first, eyes wide with wonder at the sky, the sea, the wind, the very gods who watched them. Zeus gazed upon them and felt a flicker of pride, but also a whisper of unease. For in their eyes, he saw something dangerous, curiosity, a spark that no divine order could ever fully control. But of all that stirred and grew beneath the heavens, nothing captured their gaze more than humankind, the fragile beings molded from clay and breath, who walked upright and dared to look skyward. They were Prometheus's gift, his greatest act of love and defiance. He had shaped them carefully from the earth, sculpting each form with the patience of an artist and the reverence of a priest. Into their limbs he pressed the strength of mountains, into their lungs the rhythm of the wind, into their eyes the spark of wonder. And when Athena breathed life into them, they awakened not with fear, but with awe. The first humans wandered beneath the stars and felt the warmth of day upon their skin, yet they did not understand their place in the world. They gazed upward at the endless blue, sensing that someone watched them from above. They offered small tokens of gratitude to the sky, stones stacked in circles, whispers carried on the wind. These were the first prayers, the first fragile bridges between mortals and gods. For a time, Zeus was pleased. Humanity was weak, yes, but beautiful in its striving. He saw how they loved and mourned, how they built and broke, how they struggled against hunger and storm. It reminded him of the gods themselves. Before the throne of Olympus was carved from lightning and stone. Yet Zeus also felt unease, for he knew the pattern of the cosmos, that rebellion and ambition slept in every creation. Had not the Titans risen against Uranus? Had not Zeus himself overthrown Cronus? And now, looking down upon mortals who lifted their faces toward the heavens, he wondered what seeds of defiance Prometheus had planted in them. Prometheus, ever bold, sensed the gods' hesitation. He had watched mankind suffer through their first winters, huddling in the dark, unable to fend off cold or beast. He had seen their fear of night, their helplessness before the howling winds. And though Zeus had decreed that the secrets of divine fire remain in Olympus, Prometheus's heart ached for his creation. He spoke to Zeus upon the marble steps of the high hall. "King of heaven," he said, "your children below struggle in the shadows. They know neither warmth nor light. Grant them fire, and they will flourish. Let them thrive as living praise to your creation." But Zeus's eyes hardened like storm clouds before rain. "Fire belongs to the gods," he replied. "It is not a tool, but a power, a spark of divine essence. In their hands it will not create, but destroy." Prometheus bowed his head, yet his heart rebelled. "Then, if you will not grant it, I will. In finders freeze after." And one night, while Olympus slept beneath a shroud of stars, Prometheus ascended the eastern slope, where the sun's chariot rested before dawn. From the heart of Helios's flame, he stole a fragment of fire, cradling it in a hollow fennel stalk. Down he fled to the mortal world, moving through mist and silence, until he stood once more among the clay-born children he had fashioned. He touched the spark to the earth, and for the first time, flame bloomed upon mortal soil. The fire crackled like laughter, its golden glow painting the faces of humankind. They reached toward it, trembling, their eyes wide with wonder. They felt warmth for the first time, saw their shadows dance upon stone, and wept with joy. With fire, they cooked food, forged tools, drove away beasts, and defied the cold. Civilization began with that single theft. A light rested from heaven. When Zeus beheld the glow of fire upon the earth, his anger split the sky. The heavens darkened. Thunder rolled across the mountains. He summoned Prometheus to answer for his crime. "You have betrayed Olympus," Zeus thundered, his voice shaking the pillars of his hall. "You have given to mortals what was meant only for the divine. You have defied me." Prometheus stood tall, unflinching. "I have given them hope," he said. "Would you rather they crawl in the dust, blind and broken, worshipping you out of fear? Let them live with dignity, and they will praise you with hearts, not trembling knees." The words stung Zeus's pride. "Then let your love for them be your punishment." He struck his scepter against the floor, and the sound of it split the clouds. Prometheus was seized by Hephaestus, the divine smith, and bound in chains of unbreakable adamantine. Far to the east, upon the desolate peaks of the Caucasus Mountains, the Titan was fastened to a cliff face, his arms spread wide beneath the endless sky. There, an eagle, the monstrous servant of Zeus, descended each day to feast upon his immortal liver, which grew back anew each night, so that his torment never ceased. For ages he suffered, watching the sun rise and fall, feeling the wind whip his face, and the fire he had stolen burn faintly in his heart. Yet even in agony, he did not repent. He smiled through his pain, whispering to the wind, "They live, they endure, that is enough." But Zeus's punishment did not end there. He turned his gaze upon the mortals themselves, and his anger hardened into design. "They have been given too much," he said to the gods. "Let them learn the cost of divine gifts." And so he summoned Hephaestus once more and commanded the creation of a being unlike any before, a woman of surpassing beauty and cunning. Into her form the smith breathed artistry. Athena clothed her in wisdom. Aphrodite bestowed upon her grace and desire. Hermes gave her a tongue of silver and a heart of curiosity. She was named Pandora, the all-gifted. When she descended to earth, the world grew quiet in wonder. Men gazed upon her and forgot their labors. Their hearts quickened at her smile. In her hands she carried a jar, sealed tight, which the gods had warned her never to open. But curiosity, her divine inheritance, gnawed at her heart like flame in dry wood. One day, unable to resist, she lifted the lid. From within burst a whirlwind of horrors, disease, sorrow, envy, war, death. They swirled into the air and scattered across the earth, each seeking a home in mortal hearts. The paradise of mankind was undone in an instant. The air grew heavy with grief. The rivers darkened with tears, and the laughter of the first men was replaced by lament. Terrified, Pandora slammed the jar shut, but it was too late. Only one thing remained inside, a faint, trembling light. Hope. It lingered at the bottom of the jar, flickering softly like a dying ember. And when humanity, broken and weary, found it, they clung to it with all their strength. Hope, the last and smallest gift of the gods, became the spark that kept them walking forward through darkness. Zeus watched from Olympus as mortals struggled to rebuild their lives. His anger slowly cooled, for though they now suffered, they did not yield. They loved still, they built still, they sang still, and though they feared him, they also revered him, offering prayers and sacrifices upon sacred altars. The fires they lit in his honor no longer angered him. They were reminders of Prometheus's defiance, yes, but also of humanity's perseverance. The god of thunder began to understand that rulership was not command alone. It was also stewardship and the art of restraint. But curiosity, her divine inheritance, gnawed at her heart like flame in dry wood. One day, unable to resist, she lifted the lid. From within burst a whirlwind of horrors, disease, sorrow, envy, war, death. They swirled into the air and scattered across the earth, each seeking a home in mortal hearts. The paradise of mankind was undone in an instant. The air grew heavy with grief. The rivers darkened with tears, and the laughter of the first men was replaced by lament. They built cities, carved temples, and raised their eyes toward the clouds, calling his name Zeus Zenios, protector of guests and wanderers, Zeus Ombrios, bringer of rain, Zeus Astrapios, wielder of lightning. From the highest peak of Olympus, he listened to their prayers and found, to his own surprise, that he enjoyed their voices. For though they were frail and foolish, they were also wondrous in their striving. Through fire, through loss, through curiosity and pain, mankind had learned to endure, and in that endurance, Zeus saw a reflection of the divine. He stood before his throne, the stormlight flickering across his face, and spoke softly into the wind. They will rise, they will fall, but they will remember. And as long as they remember, the gods will never fade. Lightning arced across the horizon, illuminating the sleeping world below. From the ashes of divine punishment, humanity had found its purpose. From stolen fire, they had forged civilization. And from the wrath of Zeus, they had learned both fear and faith. The shaping of mankind was complete, but the story between gods and mortals had only just begun. The laws of heaven, when the earth had settled from the trembling of war and the fire of creation, Zeus, king of heaven, stood upon his mountain and gazed down at the world he had both wounded and remade. The rivers glittered beneath the sun, the forests stretched green and vast, and humankind moved across the land like sparks cast from a divine forge. But even in their newfound light, shadows began to grow. Mortals fought among themselves, taking what was not theirs. They lied, broke oaths, and defied the order he had fought so hard to build. Zeus felt the balance tremble again, this time not from titans or monsters, but from the hearts of his fragile creations. The world he had inherited from chaos would fall back into it, unless there were laws to hold it steady. And so, from the marble seat of Olympus, Zeus rose to establish the principles that would bind gods and mortals alike, the invisible threads that would weave harmony through heaven and earth. These would be his laws of heaven, and their echoes would one day shape all justice that ever was or will be. He called upon Themis, Titaness of divine order, who had stood beside him through the founding of Olympus. She came draped in robes of pale gold, eyes clear as the morning sky. "You wish to shape the world beyond command," she said softly, reading his thoughts as easily as the wind reads the trees. "Yes," Zeus answered. "Force can build a throne, but not keep it. Fear can quiet rebellion, but not root it out. The world must be guided by rule, not by whim." Themis smiled faintly. "Then we must begin with justice." And so they did. Upon Olympus, the council of the gods was called, and for the first time, the air above the mountain shimmered not with the fury of thunder, but with debate. Hera, stern and regal, demanded that oaths between mortals be sacred, no promise broken without punishment. Poseidon wished for laws over the sea, where sailors prayed for mercy yet often betrayed it. Hades, silent but resolute, insisted that the realm of the dead must be kept pure from the corruption of the living, that no soul be stolen back once it had crossed the Styx. Athena, born from Zeus's own mind not long after this, spoke with calm clarity. "Justice must serve reason," she said, "or it becomes tyranny in a crown." From their words, Zeus wove a new order. First came Dike, the spirit of justice, who would walk among mortals unseen, measuring fairness and balance. Then came Irene, the spirit of peace, whose presence would still the hearts of warring men. And finally, Eunomia, the spirit of lawful order, whose task was to remind rulers that authority came not from birthright, but from duty. These three sisters, the Horai, became the guardians of human harmony, and Zeus, pleased, named them keepers of the gates of Olympus. But even among gods, law was not always obeyed. The first to test the limits of divine rule was Ixion, a mortal king whose arrogance reached higher than his wisdom. Zeus had once shown him mercy, inviting him to dine among the immortals, but Ixion, blinded by pride, dared to lust after Hera herself. When Zeus saw the deceit, he crafted a phantom in her image, a cloud shaped like the Queen of Heaven, and watched as Ixion embraced it. From that unholy act came the race of centaurs, half man, half beast, symbols of mortal desire unbridled by law. For his crime, Zeus cast Ixion down, binding him to a flaming wheel that spun eternally through the sky. "Let all who betray hospitality," thundered Zeus, "know that no seat beside the gods is safe for those who would defile it." This became the first divine decree. Honor the laws of guest and host. Every wanderer, every stranger, was sacred beneath Zeus's protection. To violate this trust was to defy heaven itself. Next came the matter of oaths. In the early days of mankind, words were light and fleeting as the breeze. Mortals swore by the rivers, by the mountains, by the stars, and broke their vows as easily as they spoke them. But Zeus decreed that oaths would be bound by Styx, the black river that marked the edge of the underworld. The gods themselves were not exempt. To swear by Styx and break the promise meant 10 years of silence, banishment from divine councils, and the loss of nectar and ambrosia, the food of immortality. Thus, even the gods learned humility before the law. Hera, in her wisdom, strengthened the sanctity of marriage, binding love to duty and loyalty. "For chaos begins not in war, but in the home," she said, and Zeus agreed. Their own union, tempestuous though it was, became the model by which others would be measured proof that even gods wrestled with the balance between passion and restraint. But there was one law Zeus held above all others: the punishment of hubris. To defy the divine order, to place oneself above the will of heaven, this, to Zeus, was the gravest offense. For he remembered the fall of his father, the rebellion of the Titans, and the near destruction of creation. Pride had birthed every downfall he had ever known. So, when Tantalus, a mortal favoured by the gods, dared to steal ambrosia from their table and serve his own son as food in a feast of mockery, Zeus's wrath was swift. Tantalus was condemned to Tartarus, standing forever in a pool of water beneath fruit-laden branches, thirsty yet unable to drink, hungry yet unable to eat. The law was clear. Divine gifts were sacred, and those who desecrated them would find eternity barren. Sisyphus, too, felt the sting of justice. Cunning beyond measure, he cheated death twice, once chaining Thanatos himself and once deceiving Persephone. Zeus sentenced him to roll a great boulder up a hill, only for it to fall each time it neared the summit. Endless striving without reward, a mirror of mortal ambition unchecked by wisdom. Each of these punishments, though cruel, carried meaning. Zeus did not inflict them to revel in suffering, but to remind gods and men alike that existence was bound by moral weight. The universe had order now, and no being mortal or immortal was above it. Yet there were times when Zeus tempered justice with mercy. He looked kindly upon those who honored balance, who sought righteousness even in despair. When the farmer offered his last loaf of bread to a starving stranger, Zeus sent rain to bless his fields. When the weary traveler gave shelter to a god in disguise, his name was remembered forever in Olympus. The thunderer could strike, yes, but he could also shield. To mortals, Zeus became not just the wielder of lightning, but the keeper of balance. Zeus Nomios, the lawgiver. Zeus Xenios, protector of guests. Zeus Hawkios, guardian of oaths. His presence was felt not only in storms, but in every judgment, every act of fairness, every oath kept in secret. Themis, standing beside him, saw the world grow steadier under his watch. Yet she also saw something else, a subtle danger within the laws themselves. Zeus sentenced him to roll a great boulder up a hill, only for it to fall each time it neared the summit. Endless striving without reward, a mirror of mortal ambition unchecked by wisdom. Each of these punishments, though cruel, carried meaning. Zeus did not inflict them to revel in suffering, but to remind gods and men alike that existence was bound by moral weight. The universe had order now, and no being mortal or immortal was above it. Then perhaps the truest law is not carved in stone, but in the heart that upholds it. He would remember those words, though not always follow them. For even gods, bound though they were to eternal roles, wrestled with the same flaws they punished in others. The very order Zeus had built would one day test him most of all. As night fell over Olympus, the stars shimmered like silent witnesses. The world below slept in uneasy peace. Mortals prayed, kings judged, and the winds carried the whispers of justice across the land. The gods withdrew to their golden halls, and Zeus sat alone upon his throne, the thunderbolt across his knees. He looked down at the world of men, at their fires, their wars, their fragile faith, and felt the weight of eternity pressing upon his chest. The storm inside him stirred once more, for though he had brought law to heaven, he could not yet bring peace to himself. The loves of Zeus, the world turned golden under the watch of Olympus, but peace never lasts long in the house of gods. Even amid justice and divine order, emotions stirred like storm clouds on the horizon: desire, envy, loneliness, and longing. And none felt these more than Zeus himself, king of heaven, whose heart, like the sky, could never remain still. For though his thunder ruled the heavens and his laws shaped the earth, Zeus was not untouched by yearning. The same fire that forged lightning within his hands burned also within his soul. He was eternal, yes, but eternity is a lonely throne. And so, the king of the gods sought connection, not just dominion. From the immortal to the mortal, from queen to shepherdess, his heart wandered the breadth of creation, leaving behind a trail of legends that would echo through all ages. It began with Metis, the titaness of wisdom, his first love and counselor. She was the one who had guided him in the war against Cronus, whose counsel had freed the world from tyranny. But prophecy, his old companion and tormentor, rose once more. It whispered that Metis would bear a daughter who would surpass her father in wisdom, and a son who would overthrow him, as Zeus had overthrown Cronus. The thought chilled him, for Zeus, who had escaped the jaws of his own father's fear, could not bear to see the same prophecy take root again. Yet he loved Metis deeply, and the choice tore at him like lightning splitting the sky. When she grew heavy with child, Zeus wept alone beneath the clouds, torn between love and dread. Finally, he called upon his power and transformed her into pure light, then swallowed her whole. The world shuddered, the winds paused, and silence fell upon Olympus. But Metis did not die. She lived within him, her wisdom whispering in his thoughts, her presence haunting his dreams. And one day, when the pain in Zeus's head became unbearable, a thunder that pounded behind his brow, he roared for Hephaestus, god of the forge. "Strike me," he commanded. "Split my skull open and end this torment." With a single blow of his hammer, the smith obeyed. From the wound burst a radiant light, and from that light emerged a goddess, fully grown, armored in gleaming bronze, and crowned with an owl's gaze. Her name was Athena, goddess of wisdom, war, and reason, the daughter of both Zeus and Metis, born not from flesh, but from thought. When Zeus looked upon her, awe and pride replaced fear. She bowed before him, serene and unshaken. "I am your mind made manifest," she said, "and your heart given form." In her, he saw the best of himself: clarity, justice, and restraint. Athena became his favored child, his truest companion in rule, the living symbol of divine intellect. But wisdom alone could not still his heart. After Metis and Athena, Zeus's passions turned once again toward the world below. His gaze fell upon Themis, his former counselor, whose calm beauty reminded him of balance itself. Together they brought forth the Horai, goddesses of the seasons and moral order, and the Moirai, the fates who spun, measured, and cut the threads of destiny. But even Themis, steady and wise, could not hold him. His love, vast as the sky, was a force that could not be contained by any single bond. Then came Eurynome, daughter of Oceanus, with hair that shimmered like the surface of calm waters. She danced upon the waves before the dawn of time, and Zeus, captivated by her grace, joined her. From their union came the Charites, the Graces, Aglaia splendor, Euphrosyne mirth, and Thalia joy. They brought beauty, laughter, and harmony into the world, tempering the storm's fury with gentleness. Still, the King of Heaven's desire wandered further. His heart was vast, but so too was his restlessness. He fell for Mnemosyne, goddess of memory, whose eyes held the reflection of all ages. For 9 nights they lay together, and from that union were born the Muses, 9 daughters whose songs gave the world its stories, music, and art. Calliope, Clio, Erato, Euterpe, Melpomene, Polyhymnia, Terpsichore, Thalia, and Urania. Their voices carried across time itself. When mortals composed songs or spoke poetry, it was said that the breath of Zeus's daughters stirred their tongues. But perhaps the most enduring of all his loves was his queen, Hera, sister and consort, goddess of marriage and sovereignty. Their union symbolized the divine order itself, binding heaven and earth. Hera was proud, radiant, and fierce a match for Zeus in power, if not in temper. Together they ruled Olympus with majesty, yet their love was both sacred and storm-tossed. For though Hera loved him with the strength of eternity, she could not bear his endless infidelities. Each time Zeus's heart strayed, her jealousy ignited like wildfire, and each time she raged, the heavens trembled. Their marriage became a paradox, devotion and rivalry entwined. When they fought, Olympus itself seemed to sway. When they reconciled, the world bloomed anew. No tale of Zeus is complete without Hera's shadow beside him, for she was both his equal and his eternal challenger. Zeus's loves did not end among the gods. Often his gaze descended to the mortal world, drawn to the fleeting beauty of those bound by time. To them he came not always as himself, but cloaked in disguise, for mortal eyes could not bear his full radiance. He appeared to Leda, queen of Sparta, in the form of a swan, his feathers glistening with divine light. From their union were born the twin eggs of legend, one hatching Helen, whose beauty would ignite the Trojan War, the other, Castor and Pollux, immortalized as stars in the night sky. To Danae, he came as a shower of golden light that fell softly through the ceiling of her tower. From her womb came Perseus, slayer of Medusa, hero of Argos, whose destiny shone like a blade against the dark. To Europa he appeared as a white bull, gentle and radiant. She climbed upon his back, and he carried her across the sea to Crete, where she bore him Minos, the wise king. And to Semele, a mortal princess of Thebes, he came in the form of a man, but she longed to see him as a god. Against his warning, she begged to witness his true divinity. Zeus granted her wish, and his glory consumed her in flame. From her ashes, he rescued their unborn son, Dionysus, sewing the child into his own thigh until he could be born anew, the god of wine, ecstasy, and rebirth. Each love, each union, brought forth a being who would shape myth and history. Through his passions, Zeus seeded the world with heroes and demigods, bridges between heaven and earth. But wisdom alone could not still his heart. After Metis and Athena, Zeus's passions turned once again toward the world below. His gaze fell upon Themis, his former counselor, whose calm beauty reminded him of balance itself. Together they brought forth the Horai, goddesses of the seasons and moral order, and the Moirai, the fates who spun, measured, and cut the threads of destiny. But even Themis, steady and wise, could not hold him. Leto, who bore Artemis and Apollo, was hounded across the world, forbidden to give birth upon solid ground until she found refuge on the floating island of Delos. Io, transformed by Zeus into a white cow to hide her from Hera, wandered the earth tormented by a gadfly, her cries echoing through the ages. Callisto, a nymph of Artemis's retinue, was turned into a bear and cast into the sky as the constellation Ursa Major. Each punishment, cruel and divine, left its mark upon the world, constellations, islands, rivers, all born from the tangled loves of Zeus. For mortals, these stories were not merely tales of passion or betrayal. They were mirrors of the human heart, teaching that even gods were not beyond desire or consequence. Zeus's affairs were the mythic pulse of existence, each love, each loss, each child born from lightning and sorrow, a reminder that creation itself is born from conflict between longing and restraint. In the evenings upon Olympus, when the golden light dimmed and the stars blinked awake, Zeus would sometimes sit upon his throne, silent and thoughtful. Around him, the halls glimmered with the laughter of gods and the music of the muses. Yet within him lingered a quiet ache, a sense of distance, of something forever just beyond reach. He would look to Hera's seat beside him, empty when anger drove her away, and sigh. For all his power, the king of the gods could not master the one realm that remained ever beyond his rule, the human heart. And so the thunder rolled softly across the heavens, not in wrath but in remembrance, a heartbeat echoing between love and loneliness. The world slept beneath it, dreaming of gods who loved too deeply and mortals who dared to dream of them in return. Children of thunder. The world was vast now, humming with stories born from Zeus's loves, each echoing through time like waves striking the same eternal shore. The age of gods had given way to the age of heroes, those born of mortal mothers and immortal fathers, bridges between heaven and earth. Each bore within them a spark of their father's storm, that untamed blend of fury and light, mercy and might. They were the children of thunder, and their deeds would carry the name of Zeus far beyond Olympus. Yet beneath the glory of their legends lay a quiet truth. Zeus's children were not simply born of desire. They were answers to something deeper, his longing to understand the world he ruled. Through them, he touched mortality, learned its fragility, and saw reflected in their struggles the great paradox of creation, that even divine power seeks meaning. The first among his immortal children were radiant twins, Apollo and Artemis, born to Leto, daughter of the Titans. Hera, furious at her husband's unfaithfulness, forbade any land touched by sunlight to offer Leto refuge. For months she wandered, her feet blistered by stone, her body heavy with divine life. The winds howled against her, beasts fled her scent, and the earth itself seemed to recoil. But the sea, ever merciful, lifted an island from its depths, a floating rock unclaimed by earth or sun. There, beneath olive branches and the shimmering air of noon, Leto gave birth to her twins. Artemis came first, calm and silent as the moon, and then Apollo followed, bright as morning itself. When they cried, their voices carried across the heavens, and Zeus, hearing them, smiled for the first time in many days. He blessed them each with dominion. Apollo, the god of light, prophecy, and music. Artemis, goddess of the hunt, protector of the wild and of maidenhood. They grew swift and strong, golden and silver twin mirrors of balance, sun and moon, brother and sister, both fierce, both just. Wherever their arrows flew, order followed. Yet their gentleness softened even the hardest heart. Zeus's pride in them was boundless, yet their birth had cost much. Hera's jealousy smouldered like coals that would never die, and Zeus knew the cycle would never end. Love, for him, always birthed consequence. Then came Hermes, son of Zeus and Maia, the shy daughter of Atlas who dwelt in a hidden cave among mountain mists. When the child was born, he wasted no time crying. Before dawn's first light, he had crawled from his cradle, stolen the cattle of Apollo, and invented the lyre from a tortoise shell. By sunset, he had charmed his angry brother with music sweet enough to still the storm. Zeus, amused by his son's cleverness, declared Hermes the messenger of the gods, patron of travelers and thieves, and guardian between realms. Quick of tongue and light of step, Hermes became the voice of Olympus, the bridge between mortal and divine. From Semele, a mortal princess of Thebes, came Dionysus, god of wine and ecstasy. Hera, relentless, tricked Semele into asking Zeus to reveal his true form. Bound by oath, he appeared in divine splendor, and the mortal woman burned away in his radiance. But from her ashes, he saved their unborn son, sewing him into his thigh until he could be born anew. Dionysus would grow to embody the joy and madness of life, the laughter in sorrow, the dance after grief, the truth that even pain could become beauty. Through Danae, Zeus fathered Perseus, hero and slayer of monsters, locked away by her father, who feared prophecy. Danae was visited by Zeus not as a man, but as a shower of golden light that fell upon her bed. From that divine union came a boy destined to face terrors no mortal could survive. With Hermes' guidance and Athena's shield, Perseus slew the Gorgon Medusa, whose gaze turned men to stone. He freed Andromeda, conquered fear, and became a legend whispered across continents. From Alcmene, a mortal queen of Thebes, came Heracles, greatest of Zeus's mortal sons. His birth was marked by Hera's fury. She delayed his delivery and cursed his life with hardship. Yet Heracles' strength was unmatched, his spirit indomitable. In a fit of madness sent by Hera, he slew his own family, and to atone, he undertook 12 impossible labors, slaying the Nemean lion, capturing the Erymanthian boar, cleaning the Augean stables, stealing the girdle of Hippolyta, and many more. Through suffering, he transcended mortality, rising to join the gods upon Olympus itself. Zeus watched his son's trials with pain and pride. He could have intervened, but he did not. When he died, Zeus gathered his spirit in lightning and lifted him to Olympus. There, the sun took his place among the stars, crowned with immortality. Hera, at last, forgave him, and even she placed the crown upon his head. For all his might, Zeus felt something close to humility when he looked upon his children. Through them, he glimpsed the fragility of creation, the way strength and weakness intertwined. The world slept beneath it, dreaming of gods who loved too deeply, and mortals who dared to dream of them in return. Children of thunder. The world was vast now, humming with stories born from Zeus's loves, each echoing through time like waves striking the same eternal shore. The age of gods had given way to the age of heroes, those born of mortal mothers and immortal fathers, bridges between heaven and earth. When mortals prayed for victory, gods chose sides. Love turned to rivalry, destiny to tragedy. Yet Zeus, bound by his own laws, could only watch. He had given the world freedom, and freedom carried pain. Among all his offspring, Heracles remained the one who most resembled him, not in power alone, but in the burden of destiny. Like his father, he was born to both cause and cure suffering. The people sang of him, prayed to him, feared and adored him. I rule the seas, not their hearts. Your children cause waves even I cannot calm. Then let them, Zeus answered. Waves shape the shore. Poseidon stared at him for a long moment, then turned and strode away, the scent of ocean lingering in his wake. Athena's eyes followed her uncle's retreat. Even gods struggle to understand the world they made. Perhaps that is the world's purpose, Zeus said quietly, to teach its makers humility. He saw in them a mirror of himself, the ruler and the ruled, the thunderer and the father. Still, his heart never found rest. His children's triumphs were his pride, but their suffering was his torment. He saw mortals die young, heroes perish in glory, and lovers fade into dust. The immortality of the gods felt hollow in comparison. One evening, as the sun sank into the western sea, Zeus stood alone upon his balcony. The wind carried the faint scent of myrrh and rain. Below him, the world shimmered the lights of temples flickering like fireflies. He could hear prayers rising from every corner of the earth. Farmers asking for rain, sailors pleading for calm seas, mothers whispering for their sons' safety. "Father," a voice said softly behind him. He turned. It was Athena, her armor gleaming like moonlight, her expression calm yet knowing. "You watch them too much," she said gently. "Even gods cannot carry every prayer." "I made them," Zeus replied. "Their joys and sorrows reach me whether I wish it or not." Athena stepped beside him. "You gave them freedom. That was not a gift of ease but of meaning. They suffer, yes, but they choose. That is what makes them divine in their own way." Zeus looked at her, the child who had never been cradled, who had sprung from his very mind. "Perhaps that is what I sought all along," he murmured, "to understand choice." From the shadows came another voice, deep, resonant, uninvited. "Choice?" Poseidon strode into the light, sea brine glistening on his beard. "You speak as though choice were a virtue. Mortals choose war, greed, ruin. You coddle them as though they were infants, while they tear apart the gifts we give." Zeus's gaze hardened. "They reflect us, brother. Our flaws echo through them. Do not condemn the mirror for showing your face." Poseidon's trident struck the marble floor with a sharp crack. The air thickened with salt and storm. "I rule the seas, not their hearts. Your children cause waves even I cannot calm." "Then let them," Zeus answered. "Waves shape the shore." Poseidon stared at him for a long moment, then turned and strode away, the scent of ocean lingering in his wake. Athena's eyes followed her uncle's retreat. Even gods struggle to understand the world they made. "Perhaps that is the world's purpose," Zeus said quietly, "to teach its makers humility." Doulois. He lifted his hand, and lightning danced across his fingers, not in anger, but in thought. Each spark was a life, a story, a prayer. Each one burned brightly, then vanished. The centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. The names of his mortal children became the foundation of myth and legend. Their cities turned to dust. Yet their stories endured, woven into constellations, carved into marble, whispered by poets and priests. Men no longer honored the gods with gratitude. They forgot the altars, the festivals, the songs that once carried their faith through the air. They quarreled among themselves, hoarded what they had, and filled the earth with noise and greed. Zeus watched from Olympus, disappointment simmering like distant thunder. "They were given light," he murmured to Hera, "and they use it to blind themselves. Then take it from them," she answered coldly. "Mortals forget until they are reminded." Mortals, though fragile, possessed a kind of power he could never know the power to live fully in a single heartbeat. When he returned to Olympus, Hera was waiting. Her eyes were cool, but not cruel. "You pity them," she said. "I admire them," he answered. "They fear you, perhaps," he said softly, "but they also remember me. And memory, my queen, is another form of worship." Hera's expression softened, just slightly. "Then perhaps your children have taught you something after all. I rule the seas, not their hearts. Your children cause waves even I cannot calm." "Then let them," Zeus answered. "Waves shape the shore." Poseidon stared at him for a long moment, then turned and strode away, the scent of ocean lingering in his wake. Athena's eyes followed her uncle's retreat. Even gods struggle to understand the world they made. "Perhaps that is the world's purpose," Zeus said quietly, "to teach its makers humility." And in those stories, Zeus endured not merely as a ruler of storms, but as a father of worlds, a being both terrible and compassionate, whose children walked the earth in his image. As stars emerged one by one over the dark sea, Zeus gazed upward, seeing in their constellations the faces of those he loved. Apollo's light, Artemis's bow, Hermes' winged stride, Athena's calm eyes, Heracles' strength, each one a spark of thunder, each one eternal. He closed his hand, and the lightning dimmed. Mortals, though fragile, possessed a kind of power he could never know, the power to live fully in a single heartbeat. When he returned to Olympus, Hera was waiting. Her eyes were cool, but not cruel. "You pity them," she said. "I admire them," he answered. "They fear you, perhaps," he said softly, "but they also remember me. And memory, my queen, is another form of worship." Hera's expression softened, just slightly. "Then perhaps your children have taught you something after all." When he died, Zeus gathered his spirit in lightning and lifted him to Olympus. There, the sun took his place among the stars, crowned with immortality. Hera, at last, forgave him, and even she placed the crown upon his head. For all his might, Zeus felt something close to humility when he looked upon his children. Through them, he glimpsed the fragility of creation, the way strength and weakness intertwined. Heracles' path was humanity's path: struggle, redemption, and finally, peace. When at last Heracles died and was received among the stars, Zeus wept not as a king, but as a father. There were others: Helen, the face that launched 1,000 ships; Minos, the lawgiver of Crete; Rhadamanthus, judge of the dead; Sarpedon, the noble warrior of Troy. Each child carried a fragment of Zeus's spirit into the world, their lives the echoes of his divine essence refracted through mortal form. And in those stories, Zeus endured not merely as a ruler of storms, but as a father of worlds, a being both terrible and compassionate, whose children walked the earth in his image. As stars emerged one by one over the dark sea, Zeus gazed upward, seeing in their constellations the faces of those he loved. Apollo's light, Artemis's bow, Hermes' winged stride, Athena's calm eyes, Heracles' strength, each one a spark of thunder, each one eternal. He closed his hand, and the lightning dimmed 18 eyes, and so he did. With a flick of his hand, he dimmed the warmth of the sun, letting frost creep across the world. Rivers hardened into glass, crops withered where they stood. Humanity huddled in silence beneath the cold gaze of the heavens, remembering once again that the sky could both bless and curse. When their cries rose to Olympus, Zeus relented. The snows melted, the rivers sang again, and the fields turned green. The heavens sighed in peace. For the first time in an age, the King of Gods smiled, not as conqueror, not as judge, but as father. And the world, sensing it, slept beneath a sky that seemed for a moment kind. Wrath and mercy. The world changed slowly under Zeus's watch. Seasons came and went like sighs of the divine. Empires rose from dust and returned to it. And humanity, that bright and fragile experiment, thrived beneath the shifting moods of its creator. "They have forgotten themselves," he said. "They seek to claim the sky." And so, once again, thunder answered arrogance. Zeus unleashed the storm not as a warning but as a cleansing. Lightning split the air, fire rained from the heavens, and the proud cities of men fell into ruin. But this time, destruction was not enough. When the flames died, the world was ash, and humanity's remnants clung to life among the bones of their fallen. It was then that Zeus decided to begin anew. He called upon Prometheus's brother, Epimetheus, and the goddess Themis, and spoke, "Once more the world shall breathe. Let new life rise where old pride has perished, but it must be humble, grateful." They obeyed, shaping a gentler race of humankind, born from the soil of the old. For a while, peace returned. Humanity lived simply, hunting, sowing, and offering what little they had to the altars of Olympus. But time, eternal trickster, carried corruption in its wake. But the lesson lingered, etched into their bones. Reverence was the price of survival. Yet his anger was not always measured. There came a time when even his mercy could not restrain his wrath. In the age of bronze, men grew violent and prideful. They built weapons for glory rather than defense, their kingdoms drowning in conquest. They boasted that their walls reached higher than Olympus, that their kings were mightier than gods. Zeus listened to their claims, and a shadow crossed his face. Lycaon was clever and ruthless, beloved by his people but feared by all who crossed him. He boasted that his cunning surpassed even Zeus's. To prove it, he invited the god disguised as a wanderer to a feast. Lycaon mocked the traveller's wisdom, whispering to his servants to prepare a dish made from human flesh, thinking to test if his guest were truly divine. When Zeus tasted the food, the illusion shattered. The roof split open with a roar of thunder, and lightning flared from his eyes. Through them, Zeus's essence remained alive in mortal memory, flickering like a flame that refused to die. Sometimes he would descend to the mortal world, not as king, but as wanderer. Disguised in mortal form, he walked among shepherds and kings, listening to their songs and sorrows. Once, in a small village, he saw a father lift his child onto his shoulders, laughing though the man's clothes were torn and his belly empty. For a moment, Zeus felt the ache of envy, but it was not. Humanity's corruption spread deeper than he imagined. Murder, greed, deceit, all flourished like weeds. Even the gods themselves grew weary of mortal folly. And so came his greatest judgment, the great flood. From the heights of Olympus, Zeus looked down upon a world rotted by cruelty. No prayer rose to heaven anymore. No altar burned in his honor. The earth reeked of sin, and so he called forth the storm. Clouds blackened the horizon, winds tore the trees from their roots, and thunder cracked like mountains breaking. The seas rose and devoured the land. Valleys became oceans, peaks became islands. Men clung to floating debris, crying to gods who no longer answered. Yet one voice did not fade: a mortal named Deucalion, son of Prometheus, and his wife Pyrrha, daughter of Epimetheus. They alone honored the gods and lived with humility. Prometheus, foreseeing his father's wrath, had warned them to build an ark. When the storm came, they climbed aboard, and for 9 days and nights they drifted through an endless sea. Lightning flashed above them, but it never struck. Finally, the rain ceased, and their boat came to rest upon the peaks of Parnassus. As the waters receded, Deucalion and Pyrrha stood upon the wet stone and wept. "The world is empty," she whispered. "We are alone. It's a billet with a time." Zeus heard their grief, and his heart softened. He sent Hermes to deliver his word. "Cast behind you the bones of your mother." At first they did not understand, but then Deucalion realized that Mother Earth Gaia was meant, and her bones were the stones upon which they stood. They obeyed, throwing stones over their shoulders, and where each fell, a new person rose: men from Deucalion's stones, women from Pyrrha's. Thus the world was repopulated, born again from stone and sorrow. Generations passed, and again men grew proud. They built ships to cross the seas, towers that reached the clouds, and words to question the heavens. Some even denied the gods altogether. When Zeus saw this, sorrow replaced anger. "They have inherited not our power, but our flaw," he said softly. "Pride is born of divinity." Still, one act would test even his patience: the tale of Lycaon, the wolf king of Arcadia. The king's laughter froze. In an instant, his palace crumbled, and Lycaon's form twisted, limbs shrinking, teeth sharpening, eyes burning with wild hunger. "You sought to see if I was God," Zeus said, his voice shaking the world. "Now you will live as beast and know what divinity you defied." Lycaon's cry became a howl, echoing through the forests, and his descendants, the first wolves, carried the curse forever. That act, Zeus thought, would be enough to frighten mankind back to piety. Yet wrath and mercy often walked together, as they did in the tale of Philemon and Baucis. Two humble souls, old and poor, lived in a small hut upon the plains of Phrygia. When Zeus and Hermes descended to earth disguised as travelers, they knocked upon many doors seeking shelter. Every mansion turned them away. Only Philemon and Baucis welcomed them, offering what little they had: a bowl of olives, a jug of wine, and warm smiles. As the gods dined, the wine jug refilled itself, and the old couple realized who their guests were. Trembling, they begged forgiveness for their meager offerings. Zeus only smiled. "You have shown greater wealth than all the kings of this land." When they stepped outside, the valley was a lake, and the homes of the greedy lay submerged beneath the waters. Only the hut remained, transformed into a marble temple. Zeus granted the couple one wish, and they asked only to die together, never to live one day apart. Their wish was granted. When death came, they were turned into twin trees, their branches entwined forever. Such was Zeus's justice, wrath to the proud, mercy to the humble. But the balance was never easy to maintain. Even the gods quarreled over his judgments. Athena often pleaded for wisdom over punishment. Hera demanded vengeance without end. Once, when a mortal hero offended her, she begged Zeus to destroy his line. "He insulted your name," she said, "and mocked your temples." Zeus looked down from Olympus, seeing the man in question flawed, proud, but kind to his children. "He has built what we could not," Zeus replied softly. "Love." Hera's eyes flashed. "Love does not absolve arrogance." "No," Zeus said, "but it redeems it." That night, thunder rolled gently across the horizon, and the man lived. From that day forth, Zeus vowed never again to destroy mankind completely. "Let their folly be their punishment," he said, "and their endurance their salvation." His mercy, however, was not weakness. Zeus still guarded the balance between heaven and earth with vigilance. When mortals grew too bold, he reminded them of their place. Yet still, in the deep hours of Olympus, when the feasts had ended and the halls grew silent, Zeus sat alone, listening to the wind hum through the marble arches. He wondered if even gods could escape the laws they made. Was wrath truly justice, or merely the echo of his father's fear? Was mercy weakness, or the proof of something greater love? Sometimes, when lightning flashed across the night sky, mortals said the gods were angry. But perhaps, sometimes, it was not anger at all. Perhaps it was Zeus remembering every soul he had judged, every world he had drowned and rebuilt, every prayer that rose into the storm and vanished. And then, after the thunder faded, rain would fall soft, steady, forgiving. The earth would drink it, the flowers would bloom, and humanity, small and unbroken, would live again. That was Zeus's greatest secret. His wrath created fear, but his mercy created faith. And faith, more than thunder, would keep his name alive forever. Hera did not forgive easily, but she understood her husband better then. His mercy was not indulgence, it was wisdom born of eternity. As centuries turned, Zeus's legend evolved. Mortals began to call him Zeus Eleutherios, bringer of freedom, Zeus Soter, the savior, Zeus Hatios, the giver of rain. To sailors, he was the light that guided ships through storms. To kings, the voice that crowned or dethroned. To poets, the muse that thundered through their hearts. When they despaired, he offered signs of hope: a sudden rain upon parched soil, a flash of lightning illuminating the night, a dream of courage whispered into the hearts of kings. His dual nature became the rhythm of the world. Farmers prayed for his rain but feared his storm. Sailors thanked him for steady winds, yet cursed his tempests. He was both savior and destroyer, a god who demanded respect because he knew the fragility of life. And so, one night, he descended to her chambers disguised as her husband, Amphitryon, who had gone to war. The deception was seamless. Even the stars dimmed their gaze. From that union, Heracles was conceived, destined to bridge the chasm between God and man. His very name, Glory of Hera, was chosen by Zeus to appease his queen. But Hera's jealousy, eternal and unyielding, could not be soothed by words. The moment she learned of the child's conception, her fury ignited. When Heracles was born, Hera sent 2 serpents to slither into the cradle where the infant slept. Yet before their fangs could pierce his skin, the baby reached out with tiny hands and crushed them both, their bodies coiling limp in his grip. That night, thunder rolled across the sky, not in wrath, but in awe. Even Zeus marveled at the strength that pulsed through his mortal son. But Hera's vengeance was not so easily ended. As the boy grew into manhood, broad-shouldered, kind-eyed, and restless, she watched from Olympus with bitter patience. When he wed Megara, daughter of Thebes' king, and fathered children, Hera struck. She sent madness upon him, a black tempest of the mind. In its grip, Heracles saw monsters where his family stood. When the frenzy passed, his wife and children lay dead by his own hand. When sanity returned, he fell to his knees in horror. His cries echoed through the mountains, carried by wind to every corner of Greece. "Father," he wept, "if there is justice in heaven, grant me a way to atone." Zeus heard him but remained silent. It was not mercy his son needed, but redemption. The oracle of Delphi spoke at last. "Go to King Eurystheus of Mycenae. Submit yourself to his command. 12 labors he will set before you, and through them your soul shall be cleansed." Boscals. So began the trials of Heracles, the greatest journey of suffering and strength in all mortal history, a tale that would echo forever through the halls of Olympus. The first labor, the Nemean lion. Heracles traveled to Nemea, where a monstrous lion with impenetrable hide terrorized the land. Arrows shattered against its golden fur, swords bent like reeds. When the beast lunged, Heracles caught it in his arms and wrestled it with sheer strength, choking it until its roar faded into silence. With its own claws, he skinned the creature, wearing its pelt as armor, a symbol of victory and resilience. The second labor, the Lernaean Hydra. In the swamps of Lerna dwelled a serpent with 9 heads. When one was severed, 2 grew in its place. Heracles fought it beside his nephew Iolaus, cauterizing each stump with fire so no new heads could grow. When at last the Hydra lay dead, Hera's rage scorched the sky. But Zeus looked down with pride. The third labor, the Ceryneian Hind. A sacred deer of Artemis, swift and radiant as dawn, roamed the forests of Arcadia. Heracles pursued it for a year, never resting, until at last he captured it unharmed. When Artemis confronted him, his humility softened her wrath, and she allowed him to complete his task. From that day, the huntress regarded him with quiet respect. The fourth labor, the Erymanthian boar. A monstrous boar ravaged the countryside, its tusks sharp as spears. Heracles chased it through snow and storm, trapping it in a net. He carried it to Eurystheus, who cowered inside a bronze jar at the sight. Even Zeus laughed that day, a rumble of amusement shaking the clouds. The fifth labor, the Augean stables. King Augeas' stables held thousands of cattle, their filth untouched for 30 years. Heracles diverted 2 great rivers, washing them clean in a single day. Yet when the king refused payment, Heracles returned later and slew him, proof that even strength must answer to justice. The sixth labor, the Stymphalian birds. Deadly birds with bronze beaks and razor feathers plagued a forest. Using a rattle forged by Hephaestus, Heracles startled them into flight and shot them down with his arrows. Their metallic cries echoed across the heavens, a strange music of death and deliverance. The seventh labor, the Cretan bull, the trials of Heracles. The storm had quieted over Olympus, but the echoes of Zeus's many loves still rolled across the world below. From those mortal unions had risen countless heroes, kings, and demigods, each marked by a spark of divine flame. Yet none burned brighter or suffered more deeply than Heracles, son of Zeus and the mortal queen Alcmene. It was said that even the gods turned their gaze away from that vengeance, for its beauty and horror were one. The ninth labor, the girdle of Hippolyta. Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons, greeted Heracles with honor and friendship, willing to gift him her golden girdle. But Hera spread lies among the Amazons, whispering that Heracles sought conquest. Battle erupted. When the dust cleared, Hippolyta lay dead by his hand. Heracles wept for her, understanding too late that war often destroys what peace could have given freely. The 10th labor, the cattle of Geryon. Far to the west, beyond the setting sun, Heracles confronted the giant Geryon, who had 3 bodies joined as one. With his bow, the hero slew him and drove the crimson cattle home across deserts and mountains. It was said the pillars he raised at the world's edge became the gateway to the Atlantic, marking the boundary of mortal reach. The 11th labor, the apples of the Hesperides. Golden fruit that granted immortality grew in a distant garden, guarded by nymphs and a dragon. Heracles sought the help of Atlas, who held the sky upon his shoulders. Atlas fetched the apples while Heracles bore the heavens in his stead. When Atlas returned, intending to abandon the burden forever, Heracles tricked him into taking it back. He returned to Greece, bearing the apples that shone with divine fire. The 12th labor, the capture of Cerberus. His final task led him into the underworld itself. Hades, stern and just, permitted Heracles to take Cerberus, the 3-headed guardian, so long as no weapon was used. Heracles wrestled the beast with his bare hands, dragging it into the light of day before returning it unharmed. The world, for one breathless moment, saw the gates of death opened and closed by mortal will. When the 12 labors ended, Heracles' soul was tempered like a blade forged in both heaven and earth. His body, once marred by sin, now shone with the strength of redemption. Yet Hera's hatred had not wholly cooled. She sent new trials, wars, betrayals, loss, but none could break him. One day, while traveling through Thessaly, Heracles encountered a young woman named Deianira, whose grace soothed even his restless heart. They married, seeking peace after years of toil. But fate, ever cruel, waited nearby. The centaur Nessus, wounded by Heracles' arrow, deceived Deianira with his dying breath. "Take my blood," he gasped, "and it will bind his love to you forever." Years later, fearing her husband's wandering heart, Deianira smeared the blood upon a cloak and sent it to him. But Nessus's words were poison. The blood burned like acid when Heracles donned the garment. His skin seared, his veins turned to fire. In agony, he built his own funeral pyre upon Mount Oeta. As the flames rose, Zeus looked down. Hera stood beside him, silent. "He has suffered enough," she said quietly. Zeus nodded. "He has proven what even gods must learn, that pain is not punishment, but passage." Lightning struck the pyre, and Heracles' mortal body burned away. From the smoke rose his divine spirit, radiant and unbroken. The heavens opened, and he ascended to Olympus. There, Zeus embraced him as a true son. Hera, moved beyond envy, placed a crown of stars upon his brow and welcomed him among the immortals. From that day, Heracles sat beside his father, god of strength and courage. The people of Greece honored him as the greatest of heroes, and his labors became the measure of endurance itself. Zeus often looked upon him with quiet pride. "He was my wrath," he would say, "and my mercy. Through him, I learned that even gods are purified by pain." And when mortals prayed for strength, Zeus no longer answered with thunder. Instead, he whispered the name of his son, letting courage awaken from within them. The tale of Heracles spread far beyond Greece. In distant lands, he was called by other names, his image carved into temples and stories, his deeds retold wherever people struggled and endured. Through him, Zeus's legacy grew not by fear, but by inspiration. And when storms rolled across the sky, travelers said they could hear two voices in the thunder. One commanding, one laughing, father and son, reunited at last, their echoes mingling forever in the breath of the divine. The Trojan threads. The centuries flowed like rivers of light beneath the watchful eyes of Olympus. Empires rose, fell, and rose again. The songs of mortals grew louder, their cities grander, their courage and vanity more alike with every passing age. Zeus watched it all from his golden throne, his gaze vast as the sky itself, and though he no longer descended often to the mortal world, his influence still guided the threads of destiny. For beneath the surface of mortal ambition, the loom of fate never ceased its work, and upon that loom three sisters wove. The Moirai, the Fates, spun the destiny of every being, mortal and immortal alike. Clotho spun the thread, Lachesis measured it, and Atropos, silent and patient, cut it. Even Zeus, who had once claimed dominion over sky and storm, bowed before their decrees. For not even thunder could silence the whisper of inevitability. The threads of one age began to tremble, bright and tangled, converging upon a single point, a war that would test gods and mortals alike. A conflict born not of necessity, but of pride, desire, and the invisible hand of destiny. This was the Trojan War, and though men would fight it, the gods themselves would bleed through its shadow. It began, as such things often do, with beauty. At a feast celebrating the marriage of Peleus and Thetis, the sea nymph chosen by prophecy to bear a son greater than his father, all the gods of Olympus gathered. The air shimmered with laughter and song, golden goblets clinking, ambrosia flowing like rivers of honey. But amid the joy, one goddess was not invited, Eris, the spirit of discord. Scorned, she arrived unbidden, her presence chilling the air. In her hand she held a golden apple, polished to a gleam, upon which were inscribed three words, "For the fairest." She cast it among the gathered goddesses and vanished with a smile. The apple fell between Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, each radiant, each certain of her right to claim it. Hera, queen of gods, saw it as her due by rank. Athena, goddess of wisdom, saw it as reward for her virtue. Aphrodite, goddess of love, saw it as proof of her beauty. Their quarrel shook Olympus. None dared to judge among them, not even Zeus. He knew too well the cost of choosing between powers so great. Instead, he called forth Hermes and said, "Take them to the mortal realm. Let a man decide, for men are born to bear the weight of divine folly." And so the three descended to the slopes of Mount Ida, where a young shepherd named Paris, prince of Troy, tended his flocks. Hermes appeared before him, explaining the task. "You, Paris, are chosen to judge the goddesses. Choose wisely, for the fate of the world will follow your hand." One by one, they offered their gifts. Hera promised power, dominion over all the earth. Athena offered wisdom, victory, and glory in war. Aphrodite smiled and whispered, "I offer love, the most beautiful woman in the world." Paris, young and vain, chose the third. He gave the apple to Aphrodite. Far away, in the city of Sparta, lived Helen, queen and wife to King Menelaus. When Paris, guided by Aphrodite, came to her, the threads of fate tightened. Desire ignited like wildfire. Helen left her husband and sailed with Paris to Troy. The sea darkened, the winds turned cold, and from that moment, Zeus knew the wheel of destiny had begun to turn. He watched as Greece assembled its might. Agamemnon, proud and ruthless, king of kings. Odysseus, cunning and eloquent. Achilles, son of Thetis, born from the prophecy he himself had set in motion. Across the Aegean they sailed, 1,000 ships cutting through the foam toward Troy. On Olympus, the council divided. Hera, still scorned by Paris's choice, supported the Greeks. Athena, too, took their side, for she could not forgive Aphrodite's deceit. But Aphrodite stood with Troy, her love for her mortal champion burning like the dawn. Poseidon raged against the walls of the city he once helped build. Apollo, radiant archer, favored the Trojans. Even Ares, god of war, shifted sides with the changing tide of battle. Zeus alone remained silent. When Hera confronted him, her voice sharp with accusation, he merely said, "The threads are already spun. The war will come as it must." For though he might command the heavens, Zeus could not untangle the will of fate. He knew this conflict would wound Olympus itself. Yet he also knew that in its fire, the age of heroes would reach its end, and a new era would begin, a quieter, more mortal world, where gods would fade into myth. Years passed, 10 long and brutal years. The plains before Troy became rivers of blood. Heroes rose and fell like stars in the night. Achilles, greatest of warriors, burned with both glory and doom. Hector, prince of Troy, noble and doomed, faced him in single combat beneath the city's walls. When Achilles struck, the earth itself shuddered. Troy's hopes died with Hector's breath. In the heavens, Zeus turned his gaze away. He had seen too much of pride and sorrow to watch another son die. For Hector, too, was his child in spirit, if not in blood. The gods interfered as they always had, Apollo guiding arrows, Athena whispering strategy, Hera weaving deceit. Yet each intervention only deepened the tragedy. Mortals prayed, cursed, and fought, but it was destiny that moved their hands. When Achilles himself fell, struck by Paris's arrow guided by Apollo, Zeus felt the tremor of finality. The storm had run its course. The threads were nearly cut, and then came the night of fire. Led by cunning Odysseus, the Greeks built a wooden horse and left it as an offering at Troy's gates, pretending to withdraw. The Trojans, weary from victory, brought it inside. As stars wheeled overhead, the hidden warriors emerged. Flames consumed the city. Temples, towers, and palaces fell into ruin. The cries of Troy rose to Olympus like smoke. Zeus stood upon the edge of his throne room, watching the inferno from afar. Hera's eyes gleamed with grim satisfaction, Athena's with sorrow. Aphrodite wept, her beauty dimmed by grief. When the last tower crumbled, Zeus spoke softly, his words for none but the wind. So ends the age of heroes. What remains will be memory. Hermes appeared beside him, his wings faintly glowing. Will they remember us kindly, Father? Kindly? Zeus smiled, though it was not joy. No, truly. In the ashes of Troy, a few survivors fled. Aeneas, guided by the gods, carrying his father upon his back, his son in his arms. To him, Zeus granted mercy. Go west, he whispered, and build anew. From your blood, a future shall rise. The whisper carried across centuries, becoming Rome. Even in his restraint, Zeus, whom they would call Jupiter, planted the seeds of empire and eternity. Yet even victory left him restless. He had watched gods take sides, brothers betray brothers, and the mortals he once favored destroy one another in his name. The fire of Troy burned within him, still a reminder that divine power cannot mend the mortal heart. When the smoke cleared and silence returned to the world, Zeus descended alone to the ruins. Cloaked in cloud, unseen by men, he walked among the ashes. The ground still smouldered, the air heavy with the scent of sorrow. He knelt and touched a shard of broken marble, a piece of a statue once raised in his honor. Its face was blackened, its eyes hollow. They build, he murmured, and they destroy. Perhaps that is the only way they remember. He left the fragment there and rose, vanishing into the storm. Back on Olympus, Hera awaited him. Her voice was low, not scornful but weary. "You could have stopped it." "Yes," he said. "But then they would never have learned that even beauty can lead to ruin. Now, do you regret it?" Zeus looked beyond her, toward the horizon where dawn began to blush across the sky. Every day, and not at all. The war had passed, but its echo endured. Poets would sing of it, sculptors carve it, dreamers relive it in visions of glory and grief. And in every retelling, Zeus's silence would thunder louder than his wrath. The threads of Troy were cut, but new ones began to spin, for from its ashes came the promise of future empires, future faiths, and the slow dimming of the gods themselves. The world moved forward, as it always did, leaving Olympus a little farther behind with every breath. Yet as long as storms rolled and lightning flashed, mortals would still look upward and whisper his name. For though Zeus had withdrawn his hand, his shadow remained upon the sky, enduring, immense, and eternal. The fall of faith. The smoke of Troy had long faded, and the seas that once carried the ships of heroes now shimmered peacefully beneath the rising sun. Time, like a slow tide, washed away the scars of war. Cities were rebuilt, temples restored, and life, stubborn as the olive tree, pushed through the ashes. Yet beneath the surface of this renewal, something quiet and irreversible began to stir a change that even Zeus, king of the gods, could neither command nor fully comprehend. The age of heroes had ended. The age of men had begun. Zeus watched from Olympus as mortals turned their gaze from the heavens to the earth. Once, they had built altars of marble and gold, raising prayers like smoke into the sky. Now, they built schools and cities, their temples filled not with hymns, but with reason. They still spoke his name, yes, but less as a ruler and more as a symbol, a shadow of something they no longer feared. The great temples of Olympia, Delphi, and Dodona still stood, but their fires burned lower each year. The priests still offered sacrifices, but their eyes were dim, their voices hollow. Zeus could feel the waning of faith like a fading heartbeat in the chest of the world. One evening, he stood upon the balcony of Olympus and gazed downward. Below, the Peloponnesian hills glowed in twilight. Smoke from human hearths curled lazily into the air, not the incense of devotion, but the scent of bread, labor, and family. It was the fragrance of a world learning to live without gods. Behind him, the voice of Athena broke the silence. "You felt it too," she said. Zeus turned. His daughter stood in the fading light, her armor faintly gleaming, her eyes sharp yet somber. "They forget," he murmured. "They remember differently," she replied. "They've taken what we gave them, wisdom, courage, curiosity, and made it their own. They build altars to ideas now," Zeus said bitterly. "Justice, truth, reason. Words without worship." Athena smiled softly. "Is that not what you wanted? A world that could stand without fear." Zeus said nothing. The wind stirred his white hair, and the faint roll of distant thunder echoed like the sigh of a tired heart. "They no longer look upward when they speak of miracles," he said finally. "They look inward. And perhaps that is the end of us." Athena stepped closer. "The end of fear," she said gently, "is not the end of reverence. They still look to the sky, Father. Only now they seek meaning instead of mercy." But Zeus was not comforted. For though the gods had been born of creation's chaos, they had lived upon the breath of human belief. Every prayer, every offering, every whispered plea had fed the divine flame. Without it, the halls of Olympus felt emptier, the feasts quieter, the laughter thinner. Hera, ever proud, noticed it too. "They grow arrogant," she declared at the next council. "They speak of controlling lightning, of conquering the seas, of mastering the stars. They no longer fear us." Poseidon's trident hummed softly as he struck it against the marble floor. "They have taken the gifts we gave and turned them into weapons." Ares smirked. "Then let them fight. War will always remind them of me." Athena's gaze hardened. You mistake remembrance for dependence. War makes them cleverer, not pious. Hera's tone grew sharp. So you defend them still? You, born of thought, would see Olympus fade quietly into story. Yes, Athena said. Better to live as memory than as tyrant. Zeus raised his hand, and the quarrel ceased. The river of time cannot be dammed. We have ruled long enough. The world belongs to them now. But not all agreed. Ares stormed from the hall, declaring he would stoke the fires of human conflict until they remembered the gods' wrath. Poseidon returned to the depths, summoning storms that lashed at coastal cities. Hera turned her vengeance upon the faithless queens and kings who dared name themselves divine. The world trembled as Olympus fractured under the strain of its own pride. Zeus did not stop them. He could no longer, for in his heart he knew what they all refused to see, that immortality was not immunity to change. Even gods, bound by eternity, could not escape the slow erosion of belief. And then came the philosophers, men who walked not with swords or crowns, but with questions. They spoke of causes and elements, of reason and order, of the hidden laws that shaped the universe. They named thunder not the hand of Zeus, but the clash of clouds. The sea not Poseidon's wrath, but nature's motion. Without it, the halls of Olympus felt emptier, the feasts quieter, the laughter thinner. Hera, ever proud, noticed it too. They grow arrogant, she declared at the next council. They speak of controlling lightning, of conquering the seas, of mastering the stars. They no longer fear us. Poseidon's trident hummed softly as he struck it against the marble floor. They have taken the gifts we gave and turned them into weapons. Ares smirked. Then let them fight. They look inward. And perhaps that is the end of us. Athena stepped closer. The end of fear, she said gently, is not the end of reverence. They still look to the sky, Father. Only now they seek meaning instead of mercy. But Zeus was not comforted. For though the gods had been born of creation's chaos, they had lived upon the breath of human belief. Every prayer, every offering, every whispered plea had fed the divine flame. He wandered alone through the silent corridors of Olympus, where once music had filled the air. Statues of marble gods stood bathed in moonlight, their faces serene, almost sorrowful. The fountains ran still, but their sound seemed distant, as though echoing from another age. He found Hera sitting by one of them, her reflection trembling upon the water. For once, her anger was gone. They forget us, she said quietly. Yes, Zeus replied. Do you miss their prayers? He considered. Not the prayers, he said finally. The wonder. She looked up at him, her eyes softer than he had ever seen them. Then give them reason to remember. Zeus gazed at the world below. No, that would bind them again. Let them find their own gods, even if those gods are themselves. For centuries, Olympus endured as a silent sentinel. Mortals spoke of Zeus as myth, a story of thunder and justice, a relic of imagination. Yet in times of storm, when lightning split the sky, people still paused. Some whispered, without knowing why, and in that breath, that smallest flicker of awe, the old gods stirred. One evening, as stars turned above and the constellations of his children burned faintly in the night, Zeus summoned Athena once more. You once said that to fade is not to die, he said. But what becomes of gods who are forgotten completely? Athena looked toward the horizon. They sleep, they become dreams, and sometimes they wake again as symbols, as stories, as sparks in mortal hearts. Zeus smiled faintly. Then perhaps that is enough. He turned his gaze toward the earth. Somewhere below, a philosopher wrote by lamplight. A farmer prayed for rain, though he no longer knew to whom. A child stared at a thunderstorm and trembled not in fear, but in awe. And Zeus realized that faith had not vanished. It had simply changed its name. The gods no longer walked among men, but their essence lingered in art, in courage, In every act of creation and destruction, they had not been defeated, they had been transformed. He rose from his throne and looked to the heavens, where the Milky Way stretched like a river of divine memory. The constellations shone with stories of his reign, the lion, the bull, the eagle, the hero. They were his legacy, carved not in stone, but in light. For the first time in eons, Zeus felt peace. His rule was no longer needed. His thunder would remain not as command, but as reminder. And so the king of gods became something else. Not a ruler, but a witness. Not a tyrant, but a guardian of memory. He would linger in every storm, every flash of inspiration, every moment when mortals looked beyond themselves and saw something greater. In time, his name would fade into whispers, but his spirit, that eternal spark of order and chaos, of wrath and mercy, would live wherever the human soul reached for the infinite. The halls of Olympus dimmed but did not darken. The gods grew quiet but did not vanish. And somewhere, in the hush between thunder and rain, Zeus's voice still murmured, soft as wind through ancient stone, "I am still here not as king, but as echo, not as fear, but as wonder, minus mining." And far below, lightning illuminated the sky, striking the sea in a blaze of gold. The waves rose, shimmered, and fell back into calm. The storm passed, leaving the world washed clean. In the stillness that followed, humanity continued, dreaming, building, believing. And above it all, unseen yet eternal, the old gods smiled. The age of silence. There came a time when Olympus grew quiet. The laughter of gods faded through marble corridors, the music of Apollo's lyre no longer echoed through the clouds, and the fires of eternal feast burned low. What had once been a living realm of thunder and gold became still, heavy with the weight of memory. The world below no longer looked to the sky with prayerful eyes. Temples that had once trembled with hymns now stood as monuments to forgotten glory. Mortals had turned away, not in rebellion, but in indifference. And to the gods, indifference was the slowest death of all. Zeus, the king of heaven, still sat upon his throne of storm, though the thunder had grown softer around him. The winds that once carried his voice now drifted gently through the pillars of Olympus, sighing like old ghosts. Beneath his throne, the clouds rolled endlessly, vast and unheeding, their shadows gliding over a world that no longer knew his name. He looked down upon the earth and saw lights flicker in the night cities of humankind, bright as constellations, glowing not from divine fire but from their own invention. The mortals no longer needed his storms to fear or his rain to bless. They harnessed the sky with their machines, drew lightning into their hands, and called it science. The roar of thunder that had once silenced kings now became background to their understanding. Measured, named, explained, they had unraveled the fabric of heaven until even divinity was only a metaphor. Zeus watched them and saw in their brilliance a reflection of his own fire, and in that reflection a truth he had never spoken aloud. The gift he had given them, the spark of thought, the hunger for mastery, had made them his heirs. He had always known this would come. From the day Prometheus stole fire and gave it to mankind, Zeus had understood that one day mortals would rise beyond the reach of fear. That was the unspoken cost of creation, to forge something strong enough to one day forget its maker. Yet knowing did not soften the silence that followed. The halls of Olympus echoed only with wind. The fountains still flowed, but their water gleamed with the reflection of empty thrones. Hera's seat beside his was untouched, a cold gleam of ivory in the half-light. The earth below thrived without gods. The fields grew, the seas teemed, the seasons turned, but no sacrifice smoked upon the altars. Statues of Zeus still stood, their faces eroded by centuries of rain, but they were relics, curiosities for scholars to ponder. Children no longer learned his myths in fear, but as story legends of an age when the sky itself had a voice. He had been reduced to memory, and even memory fades. He walked once through his own kingdom, the marble under his feet cool and smooth. The murals that adorned Olympus had begun to lose their colour, dimming as mortal belief thinned. The painted wars of gods against titans, the victories of thunder over chaos all turned pale, like dreams dissolving with the morning. Even the air of immortality seemed thinner, less certain. The other gods had gone their separate ways. Poseidon had returned to the deep sea, vanishing into currents unseen. Hades remained in his dark realm, content with constancy. Athena no longer sharpened her spear. Wisdom had found a new home in the minds of men. Zeus passed the empty chamber where Dionysus once poured wine for eternal feasts. Dust lay upon the cups of gold. The laughter that once rolled like waves through that hall existed only in memory. The gods had not died, for gods do not die. They simply withdraw, fading into the silence they once commanded. The King of Heaven stepped out onto the balcony of the world. The sky stretched vast and unbroken, yet it no longer belonged to him. The clouds obeyed the laws of nature now, not the will of the divine. He raised his hand, and the air trembled slightly, an old reflex, a whisper of thunder, but the storm did not rise. The power was still there, coiled within his palm, endless as it had ever been. But the need for it was gone. Power without purpose was only echo. Below, humankind continued to climb higher. Their towers pierced the horizon. Their ships crossed the stars. They called themselves explorers, scientists, seekers of truth. They sought to understand the heavens through reason, to measure eternity with numbers and light. Yet even as they reached further than any mortal before them, Zeus saw in them the same longing that had once led men to kneel at his altars, the quiet yearning for meaning, the hunger to find something beyond themselves. It was the same spark he had kindled at the dawn of their making. He watched them through centuries. Empires rose and fell, their flags changing like the leaves of mortal seasons. New gods appeared, unseen and unimagined, their names whispered in languages born long after the last priest of Zeus had vanished. But the pattern was the same: creation, faith, disillusion, silence. Humanity had inherited the cycle of Olympus itself. At times, storms still swept across the Mediterranean. Lightning forked through the black sky, the air alive with the old electricity. Somewhere below, a child would wake from sleep, frightened by the thunder, and whisper into the darkness, asking who made the sky so loud. There, in that small and innocent question, Zeus lived again. In every moment of awe, in every breath that trembled before the vastness of the world, the god found life renewed. He no longer demanded temples or sacrifices. He existed in subtler ways, now in wonder, in memory, in the spark of inspiration that drives humankind toward creation. The divine no longer stood above them. It lived within them, quiet as a heartbeat. Zeus was no longer a ruler, but a rhythm woven into existence itself. His voice became the wind, his gaze the stars, his hand the slow rotation of the heavens. In this age of silence, Olympus endured but changed. The golden halls grew translucent, shimmering at the edge of sight. Travelers who climbed the mountain claimed strange things, that the summit disappeared into cloud, that voices whispered in the mist, that sometimes, at twilight, a great figure stood against the setting sun, vast and crowned with light. Most dismissed these tales as imagination, but those who felt the truth of them never spoke lightly of the sky again. The King of Heaven no longer spoke to gods, for there were none to answer. He spoke instead to the world itself. The thunder became his language, the rain his tears, the wind his breath. His silence was not absence but transformation. Divinity had shifted from command to presence, from rule to reminder. The storm was still his, but it no longer came from rage. It came from remembrance. Time moved without end. The mountains eroded, the seas changed shape, the constellations drifted across the heavens. Humanity continued its march through centuries of discovery and forgetfulness. Yet always, somewhere, someone looked upward and felt small before the vastness. That moment of humility, wordless, pure, was the true temple of Zeus. And so he waited. He waited without impatience, for gods are not bound by the clocks of men. He waited for the next spark of awe, for the next soul to wonder at lightning, at the cry of wind, at the music of rain. For in wonder lived faith, and in faith lived immortality. Olympus remained invisible, but not gone. In certain storms, when the sky split open in gold, those who listened carefully could almost hear something beneath the thunder, not a roar, not a command, but a low hum, steady as the earth's own pulse. It was the heartbeat of divinity, unchanged by centuries of silence. The world believed it had outgrown gods, but Zeus knew better. Mortals could measure lightning, but they could never measure awe. They could fly among stars, but they could not explain why their hearts trembled when they did. The divine, though renamed, still breathed through them. The King of Heaven no longer watched as master, but as memory eternal, unbound, patient. He did not crave worship. He desired only that creation continue, that the spark endure. His throne stood among clouds unseen, not as dominion, but as witness. The silence of Olympus was not death, it was fulfillment. The storm had spoken, and its echo would outlast the world. When the last temple stone crumbled into dust, when even the names of gods were lost to time, the sky would still bear his mark. For every lightning strike was a reminder, every cloud a trace of his passing. The heavens themselves were his monument, endless, enduring, divine. And so the silence continued, deep and infinite, not of ending but of peace. The god who had once ruled creation now became one with it. Zeus, lord of thunder, king of sky, master of law and justice, had become the quiet within the storm, the breath between thunder and rain. He was no longer a god who demanded prayer, but one who simply was, eternal as the wind, patient as stone, unseen yet everywhere. The mortals below slept through their storms, dreaming of forgotten temples and the sound of distant thunder. And somewhere, far above the clouds, the old god smiled, neither proud nor mournful, but content. The age of faith had ended. The age of silence had begun. Yet silence, like divinity, was never truly empty. It was the sound of eternity holding its breath. The immortal memory. The world continued to turn beneath the quiet heavens, untroubled and unknowing. The winds that once carried hymns to Olympus now only brushed the faces of mountains and rustled through cities of steel and glass. Humanity had become its own storyteller, its own god-maker, shaping myths from memory and ambition alike. The gods no longer walked among them, yet the shadows of the divine still lingered, woven into art, into story, into every heartbeat that paused in wonder. Zeus, who had once commanded storms and shaped empires, now existed in the stillness between thoughts. He was not gone. He had merely become invisible, absorbed into the rhythm of the universe he had helped to order. He no longer appeared as a figure with thunderbolt in hand or crown upon his brow. He existed as presence diffused through air and sky, carried in every breath drawn by mortal lungs. He was both everywhere and nowhere, a spirit stretched across time. The memory of the gods became the oldest current running through humanity. Though their temples had crumbled, their names survived, whispered in poetry, carved into forgotten stones, painted on vases unearthed by hands that no longer believed but still remembered. The myths that once bound the world in reverence had transformed into something quieter, yet no less powerful, a language of meaning. Through these stories, mortals unknowingly sustained Olympus, giving it form not in marble, but in imagination. In the silence of eternity, Zeus wandered the ruins of what had once been his realm. The golden gates still gleamed faintly, their hinges unmoving yet intact. The throne stood untouched, carved from storm cloud and light, though he had not sat upon it for 1,000 ages. He moved through the empty colonnades, his steps soundless upon marble that had forgotten the echo of divine feet. The gardens of Olympus had overgrown themselves. Vines of immortal ivy climbed pillars of forgotten grandeur, their leaves shimmering faintly with dew that never fell. He stopped beside the pool where once the muses sang. The water lay still, its surface like glass, reflecting a sky that no longer knew distinction between heaven and earth. Looking down, Zeus saw not his old face but the shape of a storm dissolving in light, formless, eternal, patient. He realized that even memory had its transformations. The gods were no longer beings of thunder and fire, but ideas made immortal through remembrance. As he gazed into the pool, visions rose like ripples, the faces of his children, the laughter of Hera in youth, the cry of Athena at birth, the songs of Apollo, the hunts of Artemis, the labors of Heracles, the wisdom of Prometheus, the grief of mortals calling upon him in rain. They appeared and faded, one by one, each memory a spark that lit the endless dusk of Olympus. He thought of the ages that had passed since those days. Empires had risen, claimed eternity, and vanished into sand. Languages had been born, sung, and silenced. The stars themselves had shifted their courses, but still the human heart beat with the same fragile defiance. In that persistence, Zeus saw the reflection of his own immortality not as ruler, but as memory enduring through them. On the earth below, scholars and poets still spoke his name, not in prayer but in fascination. They wrote of the thunder god, the father of Olympus, the lawgiver of heaven. Painters brushed his likeness in gold and indigo. Musicians composed symphonies that echoed with the sound of storms. Even in disbelief, they kept him alive, for to remember is to reawaken. Every retelling of his story was a spark in the long night of forgetting. Zeus understood, at last, the secret that had eluded even his divine mind. Immortality was not power, but remembrance. To be feared was fleeting, to be remembered was forever. His rule had ended, his temples had fallen, but his image remained, scattered through human creation like dust of the divine. Mortals would never again worship him as God, but they would never live entirely without him either. The thunder still carried his echo, the wind still bore his breath. Every lightning strike was his pulse made visible. He turned his gaze outward, beyond the earth, to the stars. The constellations still told his stories, the eagle, the bull, the lion, the hero. Those patterns, drawn by ancient hands upon the canvas of eternity, still burned brightly across the heavens. Each one was a fragment of memory, a chapter in the unending tale of his reign. The universe itself had become his scripture, written in light and silence. He felt the presence of the fates once more, faint and distant, their eternal weaving still ongoing. But now their threads glowed, not only for mortals and gods, but for every living thing that moved, breathed, or dreamed. They spun the fabric of existence without distinction, binding gods and men together in the same endless pattern. Zeus saw that he, too, was a strand once central, now diffused, but still essential to the whole. The cosmos had grown vast beyond measure, but the order he had once fought to establish remained. In its quiet continuance, his essence endured. No thunder broke the horizon now. The storms were softer, less violent, yet every drop of rain that touched the earth still carried the memory of his first command. When rivers overflowed, when winds roared, when mountains shuddered with unseen power, something ancient stirred beneath it all. It was not the wrath of Zeus, but the breath of creation itself, the remnant of his will written into the bones of the world. As ages drifted forward, humankind looked upward again, not in fear, but in wonder. Musicians composed symphonies that echoed with the sound of storms. Even in disbelief, they kept him alive, for to remember is to reawaken. Every retelling of his story was a spark in the long night of forgetting. Zeus understood, at last, the secret that had eluded even his divine mind. Immortality was not power, but remembrance. To be feared was fleeting, to be remembered was forever. What lies beyond? Why do we exist? What stirs the sky to thunder and the heart to love? These were the prayers of the new world, whispered not to Olympus, but to the infinite. And in those questions, Zeus lived on. Olympus itself began to fade from sight. The marble palaces dimmed into mist. The columns dissolved into clouds. The mountain became legend, its summit veiled forever by storm. Yet it was not destruction, it was transfiguration. The realm of the gods had become one with the fabric of the cosmos. No longer a place, but a presence. No longer seen, but sensed. Zeus stood at the threshold of this transformation, watching as his throne of stormlight dissolved into radiance. His form, once mighty and defined, began to scatter like the embers of a dying fire, merging with the dawn. He felt no fear. He had ruled the world through strength, had seen it through wisdom, and now would bless it through absence. His purpose was fulfilled. The heavens expanded around him, silent yet alive. He closed his eyes and let go of the last remnants of form. The thunder faded into wind. The wind faded into breath. The breath became the pulse of the universe. Below, the earth turned, unaware. In its night skies, stars continued to burn, and through them, the story of Zeus still shimmered. Children looked upward and named constellations, repeating his myths without knowing they were prayers. Storms crossed oceans, lightning struck mountains, and every time the sky split open in light, for one eternal heartbeat, the memory of the King of Heaven returned to life. Zeus was no longer God, nor king, nor father of the divine. He was the immortal memory of wonder, the endless reminder that all things born of chaos strive for order, and all order must one day return to silence. He was the pause before creation, the echo after it fades. He was the first breath and the last sigh. And, though his name might vanish from tongues and texts, his essence would never leave the world. For as long as storms gather, as long as light falls upon water, as long as a human heart looks upward and feels something beyond comprehension, Zeus will endure. In the silence of eternity, the immortal memory remains, echoes through time. The storm that once shook Olympus did not vanish. It changed form, language, and allegiance. When the Greek tongue faded into memory, the god who had ruled the sky found new breath in another empire. He became Jupiter, lord of thunder, law, and empire, his temple rising high upon Rome's Capitoline hill. Senators swore oaths beneath his gaze. Generals vowed victory before marching into battle. When lightning struck, the Senate adjourned, for even law deferred to heaven. The old god had not died. He had learned to govern. From the marble heights of Rome, his image spread outward with the legions on coins, in shrines, upon the standards of empire. Jupiter Ammon wore the horns of Egypt's desert ram. Jupiter Dolicinus strode the east astride a bull. Thunderbolt lifted over Mesopotamian hills. The storm travelled on every road the Romans built, speaking in many dialects, but always meaning the same thing. Power rooted in heaven, justice measured by thunder. Artists carved him in marble, the bearded patriarch of order. His likeness became the blueprint of kingship, his eagle the emblem of command. Lightning bolts gleamed on shields and coins. Even rulers who mocked the old faith borrowed its posture. The thunderbolt was both warning and promise, divine energy refined into symbol. Beneath Rome's banners, the sky became political. The voice of Jupiter was the language of empire. Priests studied clouds as others studied law, reading meaning in the flight of birds, pausing wars at the sound of thunder. Yet the tremor beneath it all remained older than any law, the awareness that some gaze, unseen, still judged. Philosophers began to whisper that the sky itself was reason, that the fire of Zeus, renamed Jupiter, was no longer a person but a principle. Stoics called it logos, a rational breath ordering all creation. Others, weary of fear, claimed the thunder was indifferent, that nature spoke to no one at all. Still, they used his name. Even disbelief kept him alive. When the empire turned to a single god, the old ruler of heaven did not resist. He became a shadow in scripture, his thunder borrowed by the prophets, his lightning turned into revelation. The Father of the sky became a metaphor for the Father in heaven. The divine court of Olympus found its echo in the thrones of angels. The storm did not vanish, it was baptized. Temples emptied, their gold stripped for churches. Yet marble refused silence. Beneath frescoes of saints and halos, the old proportions survived: the beard of power, the gesture of command, the geometry of clouds. In art, Zeus endured disguised. Renaissance painters unwrapped him again, giving him back his thunder and muscle. The human body became divine once more, and the storm returned to canvas, gilded by light. When lightning rods pierced the steeples of cathedrals, some said mankind had tamed the god of thunder. Yet the rods were offerings of another kind, acknowledgement that the sky still demanded respect. Even when explained, lightning kept its divinity. It struck mountains and towers alike, impartial as fate, echoing the same truth Zeus had once thundered. All power must answer to something higher. The industrial age forged thunder in iron. Engines hissed, rails clattered, and smoke darkened the air. Humanity made its own storm, yet the pattern remained the thrill of mastery shadowed by the cost of hubris. When smokestacks cracked the horizon, when rivers turned black, the sky returned its warning, in rain thick with soot. Zeus had not gone. He had moved into conscience. In marble courts and domed capitals, his columns stood again. The architecture of power borrowed Olympus as blueprint. Scales of justice replaced the thunderbolt. But the idea was the same: authority crowned by the heavens. Even in democracy, the storm held its seat in marble. Every oath sworn on law carried the echo of Zeus's lightning. As centuries turned, the god became metaphor. Poets saw him in weather and memory. Painters traced his posture in light. Sculptors gave him form as anatomy, not deity. The Enlightenment renamed him nature, science, reason, progress, each an echo of the same divine logic that had once spoken in storms. The world believed itself free of gods, but still wrote in their grammar. Modernity brought screens instead of altars, circuits instead of incense. Yet electricity, the same fire Prometheus had stolen, remained his living symbol. Every flick of a switch was a quiet reenactment of divine theft. Thunder had been translated into voltage. The air thickened, the light dimmed, and the first sound of thunder rolled across fields and rooftops. No one prayed, yet every head turned upward. For a moment, silence filled the space between sound and sky. That pause was ancient, the same held breath that once trembled through temples. It was memory disguised as instinct. The storm broke. Rain swept the earth clean, filling gutters, striking windows, baptizing stone. The smell of wet soil rose, rich and metallic, the scent of renewal. The god was now a principle. Power tempered by justice. Order guarded by humility. He existed wherever men weighed the cost of ambition, wherever they paused before their own creations and whispered, "This is too much." When wars scarred the modern age, propaganda borrowed his eagle. Flags unfurled his lightning. Empires resurrected his name without knowing it. The pattern repeated. The same pride, the same fall, the same reminder written in cloud and flame. History became the new Olympus, and men took turns playing God. Yet even as they built and broke, the myth endured. Children learned his stories in books bound for bedtime. The thunder softened to lullaby. Zeus became a guardian of weather, a gentle spirit of rain. Simplified, he survived. For memory, not reverence, keeps gods alive. In lecture halls and museums, scholars spoke of him in past tense. Yet, as they projected ruins upon white walls, silence always followed. Beneath skepticism lay something older: recognition. The form of the sky had not changed, nor the awe it inspired. Reason had only given the storm new names. The god persisted in motion itself, the rhythm of wind through skyscraper canyons, the hum of turbines, the pulse of power grids. Even the word energy carried his ghost. Humanity had learned to measure the divine, but not to escape it. Every equation describing force or balance or motion was a hymn in another tongue. When the lights of cities flickered and died, the stars returned old companions, patient as gods. Constellations still traced his mythology across the dark. The eagle of Zeus, the bull of Europa, the hero Heracles shining in defiance of oblivion. The sky had become archive. Each star was a letter, each constellation a word in the language of eternity. Somewhere a storm gathered, unseen beyond the horizon. The air thickened, the light dimmed, and the first sound of thunder rolled across fields and rooftops. No one prayed, yet every head turned upward. For a moment, silence filled the space between sound and sky. That pause was ancient, the same held breath that once trembled through temples. It was memory disguised as instinct. The storm broke. Rain swept the earth clean, filling gutters, striking windows, baptizing stone. The smell of wet soil rose, rich and metallic, the scent of renewal. And in that scent, though no one could name it, was Zeus. He no longer ruled. He resonated. He existed in every act of order born from chaos, in every justice wrested from violence, in every thunder that reminded humankind of scale. He was no longer a figure but a force, no longer a god but the enduring memory of divinity itself. The world that once prayed to him now carried him within its pulse. The heartbeat of cities, the crackle of storm, the murmur of waves all spoke the same truth. Creation endures through transformation. The old King of Heaven had dissolved into his kingdom. And when the wind moved through trees, when lightning flashed across distant clouds, when the night trembled with a sound too vast to name, the echo of his reign could still be felt not in fear, but in reverence renewed. Zeus had become eternal not through worship, but through remembrance. He was the pattern by which all power learned humility, the story by which mortals measured wonder. And as long as storms rolled across the sky, the memory would remain alive, electric, immortal. The last thunder, in the far twilight of history, when the boundaries between myth and time grew indistinct, the memory of Zeus settled into the bones of the world itself. Humanity had spread across continents and stars, carrying their knowledge like torches into the infinite dark. And in that scent, though no one could name it, was Zeus. He no longer ruled. He resonated. He existed in every act of order born from chaos, in every justice wrested from violence, in every thunder that reminded humankind of scale. He was no longer a figure but a force, no longer a god but the enduring memory of divinity itself. The world that once prayed to him now carried him within its pulse. Humanity, in mastering it, became both heir and usurper of Zeus's throne. Airplanes cut through his realm. Satellites orbited his sky. Yet no pilot, however bold, mocked a storm. Even with knowledge, awe remained. Lightning at 30,000 feet still humbled the heart. No one ruled the sky without remembering who once did. In the silence between thunderclaps, the old voice lingered. It spoke not as command, but as presence, a vibration in air, a pulse in memory. He had become the storm entire, the pulse that shook mountains, the breath that bent trees, the vibration that travelled through the void between worlds. He was everywhere that order met chaos. Everywhere creation balanced upon the knife edge of destruction. His will had dissolved into law, his body into the fabric of nature. Mortals no longer prayed to him, yet they lived within him, every cell and storm a fragment of his eternal design. The air was filled instead with the hum of machines and the song of wind through metal. But beneath it all, in the hidden harmony of existence, the thunder still spoke. Its voice was slower now, deeper, but it carried the same weight it always had. It was the sound of the universe remembering itself. The god who had once ruled Olympus no longer needed thrones or lightning bolts. Rain fell with reverence upon those ancient places, seeping into marble veins that still carried the echo of his name. Every drop was an offering. Every gust of wind was a hymn. He had become both memory and moment immortal, not through worship, but through persistence. The same laws that guided the fall of rain and the arc of lightning had been his first commandments. In the quiet corridors of their cities, humankind still spoke of awe. They gave it new names: sublime, mystery, quantum, infinity, but the essence was unchanged. They still looked upon the heavens with trembling hearts, and in that tremor the old god lived. When lightning flashed above distant oceans, sailors paused. When thunder rolled across mountains, wanderers felt the old shiver of humility. The justice he once spoke with thunder had become the equilibrium of nature, the balance of opposites that kept the world whole. His authority was now invisible, infinite, unending. He had become the language through which reality itself spoke. And yet, even gods who become eternal feel the ache of solitude. In the stillness between storms, Zeus could sense the absence of voices that once filled his sky. The laughter of Hermes, the fierce counsel of Athena, the tempests of Poseidon, all had faded into the great silence of eternity. The Olympian age was gone, its golden halls now a phantom architecture, suspended between stars. Only he remained, a consciousness vast and formless, listening to the music of the spheres, and remembering when that music had been his own. Time had ceased to have meaning for him, but within the endless flow of it, there came a single moment unlike any before. A storm unlike all others gathered over the world, immense, luminous, alive. It rose not from ocean or mountain, but from the collective pulse of creation itself. Winds howled in harmonies older than sound. Lightning arced across the heavens in threads of gold and white, weaving patterns like veins across the skin of the sky. The air itself seemed to breathe, each inhalation a reminder of beginnings. The storm spoke, not in words, but in understanding. The voice that emerged was the voice of everything, the echo of every storm, every prayer, every cry for mercy or justice ever uttered beneath the heavens. It was the final chorus of Olympus, the closing of an eternal symphony. And in that sound, Zeus knew that the cycle of creation was complete. He was not dying. Gods do not die. They transform. The thunder that had once been his weapon now became his farewell. It rolled across oceans, through deserts and forests, over cities and ruins alike. It spoke to no one, yet everyone heard it in some small way, in the stirring of dreams, in the sudden stillness of the heart before rain, in the quiet awareness of something vast and benevolent watching from beyond the clouds. The last thunder rolled across the horizon, slow and resonant, fading not into silence but into harmony. It blended with the hum of the earth, the murmur of wind, the rhythm of blood in living veins. In that moment, Zeus ceased to be a name and became a principle, a force, a heartbeat woven through time itself. He had begun as ruler of heaven and ended as the sky's very soul. On the earth below, humanity endured. They no longer told his story as truth, but as myth, a mirror held to their own longing for meaning. They called him by many names: Father, Fate, Law, Energy, Love. Each was a fragment of the same whole. In their art and poetry, in the architecture of power and the morality of justice, the outline of Zeus persisted. The lightning bolt became a symbol of illumination, the eagle a sign of freedom, the storm a reminder of creation's awe. The god had dissolved into humanity itself, and so the world moved forward, its people unknowingly carrying Olympus within them. Every act of courage, every pursuit of truth, every defense of order against chaos was a quiet invocation. In every courtroom and laboratory, in every question that reached beyond reason, Zeus breathed, for he had become not the object of faith, but the structure of reason itself, the framework by which mortals sought meaning in the infinite. Above the earth, the storm finally faded. The clouds thinned, revealing stars glimmering like ancient eyes. The constellations still told his story, the eagle, the bull, the hero. Their light had travelled for millennia to reach the eyes that now looked upon them. Those eyes belonged to a child, sitting beside a window in some far future, gazing upward as the rain ended. Lightning had frightened them, but in the stillness that followed, they felt something else: comfort, connection, wonder. They could not name it, but it felt like being seen. Far beyond the stars, in the vast silence, where thought becomes energy and energy becomes eternity, something stirred. It was not a voice, not even a presence, only the faintest vibration, like the echo of thunder rolling through the corridors of infinity. It was the pulse of creation, steady and eternal. It was the last breath of Zeus, carried through space and time, diffused into everything that was and ever would be. The thunder no longer spoke, but its meaning remained. It was written in the orbit of planets, in the dance of storms on alien worlds, in the fire that still burned within human minds. The god who had once ruled Olympus now ruled nothing, and yet, in that surrender, he ruled all. For even as the stars themselves one day fade, even as galaxies dissolve into dust, the laws that govern them will remain. Those laws were his language, his promise, his immortality. In the stillness between one heartbeat of the universe and the next, the faintest tremor will pass through the fabric of space, a whisper of order, a memory of power, a breath of thunder. That tremor will be Zeus.